Chapter 638. Sword Demon, and the others were a group of veteran players. Southern Azure Sword was an abominable gang of robbers. How could complaining about the GM scare them? At this moment, Yi Xiaowu used such words to threaten them. It made everyone feel like a group of adults had a dispute. One of them even said something like, "I'll go home and tell my mother." It was disgusting. Everyone continued to look at him mockingly. Unscathed in Battle said in a hoarse voice, "Quick, complain. I haven't seen the GM for so long. I can't wait to see him. I also want to ask him why the game staff came into the game. I don't know if this is against the rules." Brother Yu had complained about Yi Xiaowu being suspected of being a game staff long ago, but there had been no response. Recently, Duo, a popular game reporter, reported this matter again, and it aroused a widespread response among the players. The post denouncing him had not disappeared yet, but the game company had not responded. Yi Xiaowu listened to Unscathed in Battle and smiled faintly. Can game staff not play games? This wasn't actually a rule. It was just that the game workers' daily job was to play games, so they viewed games from a different perspective than normal players. They wouldn't be able to enjoy the fun of playing games, especially the games they created themselves. Basically, they would want to vomit the moment they played them. Therefore, most of the game workers wouldn't play their own games. As time passed, it became an unwritten rule. In fact, I had never heard of any company explicitly stating that their employees couldn't play their own games. Do you really think that people from the company can do whatever they want in the game? The company has its own system. Can anyone change the game at will? That's too childish. Yi Xiaowu's words were half true. What he said was true in the early days of the online game's development. But now, as the profits in the game grew bigger and bigger, especially in the parallel world where various organized profit-making industries had appeared directly in the game, it was no longer just an unwritten rule that game insiders were not allowed to gamble in the game. After all, for these interest groups, sometimes a very small detail could allow them to gain a lot of benefits. For example, before the players knew that the white lime of Whitestone City could disrupt a thief's stealth, if someone found out about this setting through internal channels, they would be able to make a fortune before the players realized it. In the early days of the game, there were no anti-stealth skills or items. This thing was definitely popular. Now there was a studio in Baishur that operated the white lime export business. Send the white lime to the studio branches stationed in other main cities, and then sell it. This was something that Baishur locals and neighboring main cities were used to. It was not cheap in the main cities far away from Baishur. After all, ordinary players would not travel tens of hours to Baishur like Qianli to carry a handful of soil back. Although Sword Demon and the others were veteran players, they did not understand the internal affairs of the game company better than Yi Xiaowu. They could not find any fault with his words and could not refute. Seeing that this guy didn't respond after so many days of complaints, she started to believe what he said. Han family young master nodded at this time and said, "Yes, it's not a big deal even if the internal staff of the game company came to play the game. Aren't they still killed by us 5 levels in a day?" Hearing this, everyone burst into laughter, feeling extremely satisfied. The Han family young master snorted in disdain. How delightful it was to not use such a sharp weapon on one of their own. Everyone looked at him with encouraging eyes, hoping that he could continue to maintain this style. Yi Xiaowu could not help but feel a little depressed. He originally thought that with his knowledge of the game, it should be enough to deal with Gu Fei, who knew that after entering the game and seeing the skills of Gu Fei and the others, he felt that his knowledge was completely insufficient. Their kung fu was a completely different kind of knowledge, a field that Yi Xiaowu was completely unfamiliar with. As a result, with the game as a foundation, they created a third set of kung fu game knowledge. Yi Xiaowu was even more at a loss. Yi Xiaowu also had a lot of restrictions. Just the confidentiality agreement alone made him think carefully about all the consequences before he did anything to see if there was any violation of the agreement. In front of these guys, he did not think that he could hide his identity. At this time, listening to what they said, he had indeed reported his situation to the company long ago. However, until now no one had contacted him. It seemed that everything he did not destroy anything. It was just that it was really difficult to deal with this group of people with such restricted actions. These people were all the top elites in the game. The depressed look on Yi Xiao's face brightened everyone's mood. If this person was also indifferent after being surrounded, for example, Jian Nanyu, who was surrounded at the auction house and took out a novel happily and contentedly, it would really be an infuriating scene. It seemed that this comrade Hongqian Yixiao still did not have enough fighting experience. He was quite flustered being surrounded by us. Everyone thought. They all knew that it was definitely not a good thing to be surrounded for such a long time. A group of people stood here to accompany him. They thought too much of him. Everyone still had their own lives to live. Therefore, it was impossible for this siege to last for too long. Just this operation alone dealt a blow to Yi Xiao. Everyone felt that this trip was not in vain. It was worth it. They surrounded Yi Xiao, but at this time, the veterans outside the priest academy had already swarmed in. They rushed in murderously and stood opposite them. Yutian Shunming looked at the eagerness of the veterans holding their weapons in their hands, and was surprised. "Uncles, this is a safe zone. You can't PK here. Don't tell me you're so noob that you don't even know this?" It was clear that the old soldiers were bad at games, but Imperial Heaven Divine Ming's ability to look down on people was clearly not good enough. The moment he said that, the old soldiers glanced at him, thinking that he was just a brat, and directly ignored him. He looked at the crowd and said, "Everyone, if you do this, it will be a little boring." Although the veterans were also cunning in terms of tactics, they were still aiming to eliminate the enemy. For example, they had directly climbed over the back of the priest academy. They had no intention of using this path to rescue the three of them. Their goal was to team up with the three priests and then attack from both inside and outside to directly eliminate the guys at the entrance. In the end, they did not fight head-on and directly entered the safe zone. At this time, they surrounded Yi Xiao in the middle and did not give way. What was the strategic significance of this? In the end, they were just a group of people playing games. Childish, very childish. The Han family young master, and the others also knew that surrounding Yi Xiao was at most to annoy him. What else could they do other than that? However, at this time the veterans also came over. No one was willing to let Yi Xiao go, so they just waited. Gu Fei looked at the scenery from the top of the academy's main building for a while. Seeing that there was no fighting below, he carefully looked around and confirmed that no one would cut his rope when he went down the room. He took out a flying hook and hooked it on the edge of the room. He put down the rope and slid down. Everyone saw that Yutian Shenming was shouting in the channel. Why is Qianli so rash? If the veterans grab the rope and shake it, won't he fall down?" However, the veterans just stared blankly and no one moved at all. Everyone laughed at Yutian Shenming. "He's not as childish as you." Gu Fei landed safely and walked over slowly. He said, "Everyone is here. Everyone. This can't go on." Gu Fei expressed his opinion. Everyone looked at him to see what he had to say. "Always swarming in like this, it's too messy and there's no beauty. Why don't we fight one-on-one?" Gu Fei said. As soon as these words came out, both sides were in an uproar. Although the child elite group's side thought that they were extraordinary, they really didn't think that they were a match for the veterans in a one-on-one fight. They ignored the opponent's attacks and relied on the cleric to continuously heal them. Otherwise, it would be hard to say who would die. In a one-on-one fight, apart from Gu Fei, everyone felt that they had no chance of winning. They didn't know why Gu Fei would come up with such a method that was disadvantageous to them. The veterans were also astonished because of this. They could see that apart from Gu Fei, no one else was a match for them. If they fought one-on-one, apart from Gu Fei, who else could win? How could this guy come up with such a stupid idea to give them victory? Strange. Gu Fei didn't seem like such a stupid person. The players on both sides looked at him as if they were looking at a third party. They were all at a loss and didn't understand. Gu Fei asked again, "How about it, do you have any objections?" Gu Fei's words were directed at the veterans. According to his words, he seemed to be directly representing their side to negotiate with their opponents. This isn't too good. Yutian Shenming finally couldn't hold it in anymore. He didn't dare to directly say that Gu Fei's idea was stupid, but he still vaguely expressed his disapproval. "What? Gu Fei was actually astonished, as if he didn't think that his own people would refuse. This, for us, a one-on-one fight is quite difficult, right? Asking Yu Tianshengming to personally admit that he couldn't beat his opponent was too difficult for him. The little wimp vaguely expressed his meaning in the end. Hearing this, Gu Fei came to a realization. He looked at his brothers who were glaring at him and said with a smile, "Are you stupid? I'm going to be the first to fight. Why would I need you guys to fight?" Everyone immediately understood. This was a competition. As long as Gu Fei didn't lose, there was no need to change players. This guy, was he very confident that he could defeat his opponents one by one? At this time, the veterans also came to a realization. So this was what this guy was planning. It wasn't that the veterans had never tried this kind of competition before, but in reality, a person's stamina was limited. No matter how amazing an expert was, it was impossible for him to defeat more than 10 fierce opponents. For a moment, they forgot that this was a game, and there was no such problem with stamina. Gu Fei's attitude was confident to his own people, but in the eyes of his opponents, he was looking down on them. However, after the veterans glanced at their mountain-splitting axe, they all hung their heads in shame. Mountain-splitting axe had experience fighting one-on-one with Gu Fei, 100 Lives strategist, and Gu Xian. Moreover, he was also the best at close combat among the veterans. After being defeated, his words were very convincing. These people who practice martial arts, I really can't beat them in close combat, at least in the game. At least in the game. This suffix was because mountain-splitting axe felt that the game didn't reflect the real quality of the human body. If it was in reality, the strength of the body was the foundation of strength. Just look at the most ruthless Gu Xian. He had a top-heavy body, and it was obvious that he lacked training. With this kind of guy, no matter how exquisite his martial arts moves were, he would still be able to defeat 10 people with brute force. As for Drunk Qianli and 100 Lives strategist, they were also of average build, and they didn't seem to have any explosive power. Mountain-splitting axe had really lost too much, so he changed to another place to save face. He didn't analyze that in reality, he was almost a grandfather, and those 3 were young and vigorous, like the legendary 8 or 9 o'clock suns. Of course, his guess about Gu Xian wasn't wrong. That guy really didn't train, and he was weak. However, Gu Fei and 100 Lives strategist were just not tall, but their sturdiness was far from what Mountain-splitting axe saw. Mountain-splitting axe had a lot of thoughts in his mind, but he had already admitted that he wasn't the 3's opponent in the game. Did he have any chance of winning one-on-one? The veterans discussed and muttered in their channel, and finally came to a unanimous conclusion. No. Unless he makes a huge mistake, Mountain-splitting axe said solemnly. Does everyone want to bet on this? Then Old Kai. What do you think the chances of him making a mistake are? Someone asked. This person is quite skilled in fighting, and his mind is extremely calm when he moves. To be honest, I don't think he will make a mistake, especially in the game where stamina isn't a problem, Mountain-splitting axe said. Then what about his concentration? If he's fighting more than 10 people in a row, it's hard to avoid mistakes if he's distracted, someone said. First, it's still the problem of stamina just now. He doesn't feel tired, and his concentration won't drop because of that. Other than that, it can only be because he's tired of fighting and lost his concentration. But comrades, pay attention to his fanatical eyes. I don't think he'll get tired of fighting 100 people, and it's impossible for him to lose his concentration with a dozen people, Mountain-splitting axe said. According to you, there's no way to fight? Yes, I don't think we can fight like that, Mountain-splitting axe said. After the veterans discussed for a while, they shook their heads and rejected Gu Fei's suggestion. Gu Fei was very disappointed and looked at the veterans helplessly. Then what do you think we should do? Let him go, and we'll find a place to fight to the death, the veterans said. Thus, the experts very bluntly shook their heads like a rattledrum. You know that you can't beat Qianli in a one-on-one fight, so you're not willing to fight like that. We also know that it's not easy to fight as a group. Do you think we'll agree to fight like that? Well, now everyone had something they didn't dare to do, and no one could laugh at the other. The situation was once again at a stalemate. Han family young master finally spoke. I can see that you're all masters of your words. We're not afraid to tell you that we're not a match for him in a head-on fight, and we rely on crafty plots to trip him up. Right now, it's indeed not a solution, and we're also not interested. How about this? You guys go offline first, and we'll let him go. In the future, if we want to fight or kill each other, we'll use our own methods. Today we'll consider it a draw. A draw? The veterans almost collapsed. Apart from sniper god Old Lay Dalei, everyone else had been wiped out. Yi Xiaowu had lost 5 levels, and the opponent's side had 0 casualties. To say it was a draw, they really didn't know if they were giving them face, or if they were openly mocking them. But if this went on, there wouldn't be a result. You want the veterans to block the resurrection point? That wasn't realistic either. They had limited manpower, and if they all blocked the resurrection point, the opponent would be able to eat them up. This wasn't like the big guilds, which could form several small teams like theirs, and each team could take turns in half an hour. This was actually a bit like what was said in The Art of War. When you have 10 times the number of enemies, you can surround them and annihilate them. Right now, the ratio of both sides was close to 1-to-1, and it was obvious that they really couldn't do such a big sport. After another round of discussion, the veterans finally nodded. Okay, we'll go offline first. We'll fight again later. Good, decisive. Han family young master gave them a thumbs up. The veterans immediately turned into white light and went offline. Han family young master looked at Yi Xiaowu, who was still in their circle, and said, "You go and rest too." Yi Xiaowu understood that he probably didn't want to be seen, so he didn't say anything and quietly went offline. Retreat. Han family young master waved his hand and let everyone out of the resurrection point. This ending was really all bark and no bite, especially for a battle maniac like Gu Fei, who was extremely dissatisfied. I'm not happy. People like Yutian Shunming had already shouted out in agitation. Han family young master glanced at him. Other than 3 people, the other party was completely annihilated. It seems like the leader, Hongchen Yixiao, lost 5 levels in a row. They seem to be the ones who are unhappy, right? Yutian Shunming was speechless. That was indeed the case, but where did this unhappy feeling come from? Strange. Yutian Shunming couldn't figure it out in a daze. In the end, he came up with a vague excuse. Anyway, That's true. If I was as stupid as you, we would have been finished long ago. Han family young master said in disdain, but he knew in his heart that he knew. He knew he did know. Although they were the ones who won the battle, the veterans were the ones who had the upper hand from the beginning to the end. Just like what Han family young master had said, they had to play tricks to have a chance of winning. This was different from the mercenary competition. At that time, there were opponents who were 10 times their number. After winning with tricks, everyone still thought highly of themselves. But now, facing opponents who had the same number of people, although they won, the feeling of being at a disadvantage didn't change at all. Especially in the end, which seemed to have no definite conclusion. It made people feel suffocated and unable to spit it out. This was like watching a movie, adding fuel to the fire along the way. Just as the climax of the movie was about to be reached, the electricity suddenly went out. There was nothing left, and all the emotions that had been stirred up were suppressed again. How could it feel good? I feel that we should have stayed and fought with them again. Sword Demon, who hadn't spoken much, suddenly said. Yes, that's right. Yutian Shunming pulled the 3 bows on his back and said hatefully. Games required passion and heroism. But everything that Han family young master planned would always go against this. His plan was always based on rationality, exhausting the opponent and saving himself. This kind of strategy could win the best victory, but it might not make people feel satisfied. It was just a game. Was winning really that important? Players would only feel satisfied when they were happy and excited enough. Therefore, the leader of the heaven-defying guild was supported and relied on by everyone. Not the Han family young master, but Sword Demon. Chapter 639. The veterans were nimble, and they were even more adept at climbing up and down the rope than Gu Fei. Gu Fei didn't have the time to admire the tragic scene of the first veteran falling to the ground. He hurriedly went to cut the second rope. His goal was to break the rope before the 4 veterans fell to the ground. He did it. 1, 2, 3, 4. The 4 ropes were not far from each other. As Gu Fei dragged his dagger across the ground, the ropes were broken one by one. Screams came one after another, but the 4th veteran did not move much. Gu Fei had been looking down the whole time. When he cut the 4th rope, the veteran was already close to the ground. Since he was mentally prepared, he held onto the broken rope and landed steadily. The other 3 veterans fell flat on their backs, and the players in the safe zone burst into laughter. However, the 4 of them quickly stood up and patted the dust off their butts. They were fine. In the safe zone, they wouldn't die no matter what. It was simply too safe. The 5th rope was empty. A total of 9 veterans had reached the safe zone. 5 of them went down first, so Gu Fei only had 4 of them left. Therefore, Gu Fei did not cut the 5th rope. He dragged the empty rope up and confiscated it. Among the 9 of them, the 2 magicians are not among them. Brother Yu said after careful observation. Excluding Yi Xiaowu, there were 19 veterans in total. There were 5 archers, 3 grandmasters of combat, 3 rogues, and 2 each of the other classes. This was the number that Brother Yu had calculated during the battle this morning. At that moment, there were 5 archers harassing outside the door, 2 priests in the safe zone as hostages, and 9 people coming down from the rooftop. A total of 16 people had appeared, and there were 3 people who had yet to appear. Among them were the 2 wizards who had started to turn into the alley on the right. And there was one more. Brother Yu counted, and there was a thief who was nowhere to be seen. A rogue. Everyone was shocked. Was he already close to them? Understanding the organization's intention, the flaming cloak suddenly fired 2 spells at them. There was no rogue. It seemed like he was not close to them yet. Everyone hoped that the 4 veterans that Gu Fei dealt with by cutting the rope would fall to their deaths, but unfortunately, the safe zone was the real deal. It seemed that no one would die no matter what they did. Even so, the 4 of them felt very embarrassed, especially the 3 who had fallen awkwardly. After they got up, they stared at Gu Fei, wishing they could rush up and fight with their lives. In the end, they saw Gu Fei calmly confiscate their 5th rope. Everyone looked at the Han family young master. Gu Fei's appearance was just a comical show for everyone to watch. Due to the safety zone, the veterans who had cut their ropes were not injured at all. Instead, they landed even faster. The archers were outside and the melee soldiers were inside. They could completely cover the 3 priests and kill their way out of the resurrection point. The Child Elite group's previous victory was due to the fact that their opponents did not have any priests. This time, however, the situation was completely different. It was difficult to withstand the pincer attack from both inside and outside. On the rooftop, Gu Fei felt it was a pity that the 4 of them did not fall to their deaths. However, after destroying all 5 ropes, he felt that he had accomplished something. Facing the guys below, he shouted, "All right, I've cut off their escape route. It's up to you guys now." Everyone's faces darkened. Was that the key to the problem? Now that the enemies were coming at them from the front, was there a need to escape by climbing the ropes? Without giving them too much time to think, the veterans at the resurrection point gathered together. The 3 priests Yi Xiaowu, Old Wu and Little Chen joined the team. Old Wu and Little Chen realized their importance. This time, they did not take out their crossbows to fight. Like Yi Xiaowu, they took out their priest staff and prepared to focus on their logistics. The other 9 people formed an angle of about 60 to 70 degrees with the mountain-splitting axe as the center. Each of them was less than a meter away from each other. The 3 priests were sandwiched in the middle. After setting up the formation, the group immediately charged at the people guarding the door. "Fight!" Unscathed in battle drew his sword and shouted. No one responded. The Han family young master and the sword demon were calm people. They would not make such a rash decision. Jian Nanyo's group of 7 had a strong sense of teamwork. They would not make such a careless declaration. After Unscathed in battle shouted, Yutian Shunming was eager to respond. However, Yutian Shunming was an archer. His fighting style was completely different from that of Unscathed in battle's warrior. Unscathed in battle fought. He drew his sword and was about to charge forward. Yutian Shunming fought. He drew his arrow and ran far away. The others stared blankly at the big and small duo. In such a gloomy situation, such a funny thing could not be avoided. Was this what it meant to find joy in bitterness? Water-breaking arrow and the other four clearly knew the situation in the Priest Academy. At this time they increased their firepower. Originally, they were only shooting from a distance. Now it seemed like they were advancing step by step. Suddenly, 2 rings of fire appeared in the sky. The experts' awareness was outstanding, and they quickly dodged to the side. Then heat rose from their feet. It was the 1,000 layers flames of the cinder tree. The spells appeared in twos. It was obvious that the spells were from the 2 magicians in the enemy's formation. However, the 2 magicians were nowhere to be seen. The 10 or so experts were all top-notch experts. It was the first time in the history of the game that they could not find the players who cast the spells after taking 4 spells. Flaming Jacket had yet to say anything. Yutian Shenming, who was already an archer but still called himself the number 1 magician, looked like he could not take it anymore. The arrows were accurate, the attacks from the magicians were nowhere to be seen, and they were about to engage in close combat. The Han family young master calculated for a while and finally gave the order. Enter the safe zone. Ah. The others were depressed. Enter the safe zone. Although they had agreed to hide in the safe zone if they were harassed by the archers, that was different from the current situation. Now that the enemy was going to ambush them with the 3 magicians, they were forced to escape into the safe zone. This meant that they did not dare to fight the enemy. Although they could keep their levels after entering the safe zone, their previous arrangements were all ruined. They could only let the enemy escape with the 3 magicians. Although they were indignant, they still obeyed the order given that they were facing a formidable enemy. Wandering Sword's group of 7 was the first to enter the Priest Academy, followed by Brother Yu, Han family young master, Sword Demon, Unscathed in Battle, and Yutian Shenming. The last to enter was Encyclopedic Scholar. Both parties passed each other as they entered and exited the safe zone. Their gazes were filled with the smell of gunpowder, but since they were in the safe zone, gunpowder could not be ignited no matter how much it was. Everyone was indignant as they watched the veterans leave with the 3 magicians. The veterans were elated that the hostage rescue was completed with 0 casualties. Their meticulous arrangements finally paid off, but it was a pity that the enemy had a clear grasp of the situation. They decided to enter the safe zone without any hesitation. If they were to fight recklessly, the veterans were confident that they could kill all of them since they were fully prepared. What a pity! Both parties were indignant and regretful. Gu Xian, who was dozing off at the front line of the safe zone while carrying a rock, suddenly woke up and charged into the enemy's formation alone. Who's there? The enemy was shocked. They were on high alert, ready to teach the Han family's young master a sneak attack at any time. After all, the enemy had only entered the safe zone and did not surrender. Who would have thought that the enemy did not move, but a kid who was sitting by the door with his head down suddenly made a move. The veterans did not notice this character at all from the beginning, and did not expect him to be in cahoots with these people. When they subconsciously blurted out who he was, they had already seen the face of this person. It was the despicable Grandmaster of Combat who had tormented them both inside and outside the tavern. Good timing. The veterans wanted to settle the score with the other ruthless people, so they took the initiative to attack when they saw the person. Gu Xian threw a punch at his chest, but a circle of people was about to surround him. Who knew that he would cancel the skill and jump with a flying swallow slash, flying over the heads of the people surrounding him. Everyone turned around quickly. There were 3 priests behind them. As expected, the enemy's target was always the priests. However, he was too arrogant to charge into the enemy's formation alone. Before Gu Xian's foot landed, the 9 people had already turned into an angle. When Gu Xian landed, he would fall right into their encirclement. Who knew that Gu Xian had cancelled the flying swallow slash when he was in mid-air? His body flipped in mid-air, and now he was falling headfirst. Everyone was astonished, but they saw him stretch out his hands to support Yi Xiaowu's shoulders in front of him. Yi Xiaowu felt a support on his shoulders, and the person was about to flip forward while holding his shoulders. Somersault for fun? Yi Xiaowu muttered to himself. Suddenly, an irresistible force lifted him into the air. Shit. Body throw. Yi Xiaowu suddenly reacted. This was the strength of Kung Fu players. Even though Yi Xiaowu was very familiar with the game and knew all the settings, he did not experience it himself. He could not imagine that someone could use this position to perform body throw. Gu Xian continued to flip forward while supporting himself on Yi Xiaowu's shoulders. At the same time he performed body throw. Yi Xiaowu was thrown into the air. Yi Xiaowu glanced in the air and knew that he would land in the safe zone. Even so, his attack was outside the safe zone, so he had to take full damage. However, Yi Xiaowu thought about it and felt that this attack was not enough to kill him instantly. It was just throwing him back into the safe zone. What was the meaning of this? Yi Xiaowu was about to shout, "Don't worry about me," when another Grandmaster of Combat charged out from the safe zone. However, within the safe zone, another Grandmaster of Combat charged out, reaching the goal line in 2 or 3 steps. He stepped on the stone that Gu Xian had been sitting on, then stepped on the wall of the door. After 2 steps, he was already in the air. Before Yi Xiaowu could land in the Priest Academy, he had already been caught in midair. Immediately after, Yi Xiaowu felt as if he was being lifted high above his head by the other party. Tears immediately streamed down his face. Body throw again. This body throw by 100 Era's strategist was like a 2-handed slam dunk on the basketball court. After lifting Yi Xiaowu in midair, he threw him to the ground. "I'm going to die." Yi Xiaowu felt sorrowful. Although he was a priest, he had never enhanced his vitality. More importantly, his level was low. He had already dropped 4 levels in one day. In front of these masters who had advanced class, he was no different from a bean sprout. Yi Xiaowu felt that the game was unfair if he did not die from the fall. Just like that, Yi Xiaowu was thrown into a flash of white light. On the other side, Gu Xian flipped forward again after throwing Yi Xiaowu. The group of veterans hurriedly turned around to surround him, but before he could land, he was also in the flash of white light in midair. What's going on? The veterans were shocked. Once again, Yi Xiaowu and the others could not save him in time. They felt very guilty. This brother of theirs had died 5 times in one day. Just as they were about to take care of Gu Xian to relieve their guilt, he suddenly disappeared in midair. The group of people looked at each other and shook their heads. "I haven't touched him yet." "Me neither." "Me neither." "Then why is he dead?" Yi Xiaowu, who had been reborn in the Priest Academy, had been paying attention to this side while he was flying. He saw everything clearly and said with a pained expression, "He's not dead. He just went offline." As soon as Yi Xiaowu's voice fell, his vision turned pitch black. He had been surrounded by the Han family young master and the others. Players could not touch each other in the safe zone, but the system had forcibly created a layer of air wall between them. This did not affect the feeling of crowding when there were many people. However, no matter how hard they squeezed, the players would find that there was a subtle gap between them, which the players had always found funny. Therefore, when they were blocked by others like this, although they could not touch each other, they could still squeeze out. However, in the game, due to different professions, there was a great disparity in strength. How could Yi Xiaowu, a mere priest, squeeze through the 2 broad shoulders of Jian Nanyu and unscathed in battle? Even if the 2 of them were not included, Sword Demon and Blackwater were both skinny, but they could still resist Yi Xiaowu. Moreover, even if they were both priests, they were no match for Yi Xiaowu due to the difference in levels. Yi Xiaowu's feelings could no longer be described with words. What was more depressing was that everyone had surrounded him, but no one was looking at him. Everyone turned to look at his murderer, Encyclopedic Statesman. After Encyclopedic Statesman landed, he flashed back to the Priest Academy. The people outside were still studying Gu Xian, who had disappeared in midair. If it was not for the white light that flashed when he disappeared, they would have thought that they had seen teleportation again. Encyclopedic Statesman came over to observe Yi Xiaowu, who had fallen to his death. The way he poked his head to look at Yi Xiaowu in the middle of the crowd was very much like a monkey in a crowded zoo who had managed to squeeze his way to the front of the cage to look at his favorite monkey. Yi Xiaowu met his gaze with a sullen expression, but the others looked at Encyclopedic Statesman with a face full of praise. "Not bad. It's really different with Kung Fu. This coordination is beautiful." The crowd praised. "You flatter me. It's the Gu brothers who are brave." Encyclopedic Statesman hurriedly said modestly, and kindly pushed the credit to Gu Xian. This coordination, this awareness. How can you two be so telepathic? Ken and Yu felt that the coordination between the two grandmasters of combat was very pleasing to the eye. Encyclopedic Statesman glanced at Ken and Yu and said, "It's enough to communicate with each other beforehand." The crowd was stunned and laughed. Ken and Yu blushed. He thought that Kung Fu practitioners were above the common people, and that everyone's Kung Fu was of the same origin. As soon as they saw each other's moves, they would naturally know to cooperate. He completely forgot that they could secretly send a few messages in the game to make an agreement. When Encyclopedic Statesman found out that Gu Xian was Gu Fei's cousin, and was a member of the Gu family, he eagerly added him as a friend. He did not expect it to come in handy so soon. "You guys continue. I'm going offline." It was about time for Encyclopedic Statesman. He bade farewell to the crowd, turned around, and waved at Gu Fei on the roof before going offline. The crowd turned around and looked at Yi Xiaowu, who was surrounded by them. They laughed sinisterly, as if a group of gangsters had surrounded a naked girl. Yutian Shenming suddenly possessed Tsubasa Sakuratsuka and suggested loudly, "Take off your pants and flick your dick." Although Yi Xiaowu knew that it was impossible in the game, he could not help but shiver. After calming himself down, he looked at the crowd and said, "What you're doing is hindering the freedom of the players to play the game. You can complain to the GM." Since it was a holographic simulation, there would always be some unheard of incidents in the game. How many people were there in the game's development team? Their imagination could not be compared to thousands of players. Since the start of the game, the players often did unimaginable things. It made the developers, who were chasing after the game to patch the game, feel like they were a bunch of people cleaning up after the players. In the agreement between the game company and the players, there was a clause that said, "Do not destroy the rights of others to play the game freely in any way." The agreement did not specify what destruction was. Anyway, at the end of the agreement, there was another clause that said, "The game company reserves the right to interpret this agreement." The players were not unfamiliar with this kind of agreement. For example, when installing a program, there would often be such an agreement for the players to click agree. Anyway, no one would read it in detail. As for the destroying the rights of others to play the game freely, it was widely known among the players that there was a binding incident. Two players got into a conflict for some reason. Later, one of them called his friends to take revenge. Killing the other was not enough, so he captured the other and tied him up like a rice dumpling in the depths of the forest. The player could not move, and could not go back to the safe zone to log off. If he forcefully logged off and logged back in, he would still be hung up like a rice dumpling. It meant that he could not play the game anymore. Later, the player called the GM. When the GM found out about the situation, he was shocked and quickly rescued the player. As for the lover of the binding art, he was not punished because it was his first offense. However, the game made a news announcement about this incident, stating that this kind of behavior was absolutely forbidden. If he was discovered again, he would at least be locked up in a small black room. In serious cases, he might even have his account deleted. Compared to the system in the game, the players were ultimately a weaker group. No one dared to challenge the system's authority. However, not long after, another binding incident occurred. The system was furious and immediately locked the player, who was reported in a small black room. However, after receiving a direct phone call from the player, the system checked and broke out in cold sweat. It turned out that this time, the informant and his friends had tied themselves up. Then, they maliciously filed a complaint against the player who had a grudge against them. This time, the system acted carelessly and almost got tricked. The god of the system, who had been tricked by the player, was also furious. The scammer's account was immediately deleted, and his accomplice was locked up in a small black room. This incident made the developers break out in cold sweat. It also made them realize that the wisdom of the masses was really infinite. Chapter 640. Sword Demon, and the others were a group of veteran players. Southern Azure Sword was an abominable gang of robbers. How could complaining about the GM scare them? At this moment, Yi Xiaowu used such words to threaten them. It made everyone feel like a group of adults had a dispute. One of them even said something like, "I'll go home and tell my mother." It was disgusting. Everyone continued to look at him mockingly. Unscathed in Battle said in a hoarse voice, "Quick, complain. I haven't seen the GM for so long. I can't wait to see him. I also want to ask him why the game staff came into the game. I don't know if this is against the rules." Brother Yu had complained about Yi Xiaowu being suspected of being a game staff long ago, but there had been no response. Recently, Duo Mu Duo, a rather popular game journalist, reported on this matter again, and it aroused a widespread response among the players. The post denouncing him had yet to disappear, but similarly, the game company had not responded. Yi Xiaowu listened to Unscathed in Battle's words and only smiled faintly. Can game staff not play games? This is actually not a rule. It's just that the game staff's daily job is to play games. Their perspective on games is already different from that of ordinary players. They can't enjoy playing games, especially games that they created themselves. Basically, they want to vomit when they enter. Therefore, game staff basically won't play their own games. Over time, it seems to have become an unwritten rule. In fact, I've never heard of any company explicitly stating that employees can't play their own games. Do you really think that people from the company can do whatever they want in the game? The company has its own system. Can anyone just change the game at will? That's too childish. Yi Xiaowu's words were half true. What he said was true in the early days of the online game's development. But now, as the profits in the game grew bigger and bigger, especially in the parallel world where various organized profit-making industries had appeared directly in the game, it was no longer just an unwritten rule that game insiders were not allowed to gamble in the game. After all, for these interest groups, sometimes a very small detail could allow them to gain a lot of benefits. For example, before the players knew that the white lime of Whitestone City could disrupt a thief's stealth, if someone found out about this setting through internal channels, they would be able to make a fortune before the players realized it. There were no anti-stealth skills or items in the early stages of the game, so this was definitely a popular item. Nowadays, there was a studio in Baishur City that operated the export business of white lime. They would send the white lime to the studio branches stationed in other main cities through mailboxes, and then peddle it. The locals of Whitestone City and the neighboring main cities were used to this stuff, but it wasn't cheap in the main cities far away from Whitestone City. After all, normal players wouldn't travel dozens of hours to Whitestone City just to carry a handful of dirt back home like Qianli. Although Sword Demon and the others were all veteran players, they didn't know the internal affairs of the game company as well as Yi Xiaowu did. They couldn't find any fault with Yi Xiaowu's words and couldn't refute for a while. Seeing that there was no response after so many days of complaints, she started to believe what he said. Han family young master nodded at this time and said, "Yes, it's not a big deal even if the internal staff of the game company came to play the game. Didn't we still kill them 5 levels in a day?" When everyone heard this, they laughed and felt extremely happy. Han family young master despised people. How happy it was not to use this sharp weapon on his own people. Everyone looked at him with encouraging eyes, hoping that he could continue to maintain this style. Yi Xiaowu couldn't help but feel a little depressed after hearing this. He originally thought that with his knowledge of the game, it should be enough to deal with Gu Fei. Who knew that after entering the game and seeing the skills of Gu Fei and the others, he felt that his knowledge was completely insufficient. Their kung fu was a completely different kind of knowledge, a field that Yi Xiaowu was completely unfamiliar with. As a result, with the game as a foundation, they created a third set of kung fu game knowledge. Yi Xiaowu was even more at a loss. Yi Xiaowu also had a lot of restrictions. Just the confidentiality agreement alone made him think carefully about all the consequences before he caused trouble, to see if there was any violation of the agreement. In front of these guys, he didn't think that he could hide his identity. At this time, listening to what they said as expected, they had already reported his situation to the company, but until now, no one had contacted him. It seemed that everything he did didn't break anything. However, it was really difficult to deal with this group of people with such restricted actions. These people were all the top elites in the game. Yi Xiaowu's depressed expression made everyone happy. If this person was also indifferent after being surrounded, for example, like Jian Nanyu, who was surrounded in the auction house and took out a novel happily and contentedly. It would be really infuriating. It seemed that Comrade Hongqian Yixiao still didn't have enough experience in fighting. Being surrounded by us is quite flustered, everyone thought. They all knew that it was definitely not a good thing to be surrounded for such a long time. A group of people stood here to accompany him. They thought too much of him. Everyone still had their own lives to live. Therefore, it was impossible for this siege to last for too long. Just this operation alone dealt a blow to Yi Xiaowu, and everyone felt that this trip was not in vain. It was worth it. They surrounded Yi Xiaowu, but at this time, the veterans outside the priest academy had already swarmed in at this time. They rushed in murderously and stood opposite them. Yutian Shenming looked at the eagerness of the veterans holding the weapons in their hands, and was surprised. Uncles, this is a safe zone and you can't PK. Don't tell me that you're so noob that you don't even know this. It was obvious that the veterans were very noob in the game, but Yutian Shenming's ability to look down on people was obviously not good enough. When he said this, the veterans glanced at him and thought that he was just a kid, and no one paid attention to him. They just looked at everyone and said, "Everyone, it's a little boring to do this." Although the veterans were also cunning in tactics, after all, their goal was to eliminate the enemy. For example, they had directly climbed over the back of the priest academy. They had no intention of using this path to rescue the three of them. Their goal was to team up with the three priests, and then attack from both inside and outside to directly eliminate the guys at the entrance. In the end, they did not fight head-on, but directly entered the safe zone. At this time, they surrounded Yi Xiaowu in the middle, and did not give way. What was the strategic significance of this? In the end, they were just a group of people playing a game. Childish, very childish. The Han family young master, and the others also knew that surrounding Yi Xiaowu was at most to anger him. What else could they do other than that? However, at this time the veterans also came over. No one was willing to let Yi Xiaowu go, so they just waited like this. This time, Gu Fei looked at the scenery from the top of the academy's main building for a while. Seeing that there was no fighting below, but it was in a stalemate again, he carefully looked around to confirm that no one would cut his rope while he was going down the room. Then he took out a flying hook, hooked it on the edge of the room, put down the rope, and slid down. Everyone saw that Yutian Shenming was shouting in the channel, "Aya, why is Qianli so rash? If the veterans grab the rope and shake it, won't he fall down?" However, the veterans just stared blankly, no one moved at all. Everyone laughed at Yutian Shenming. "He's not as childish as you." Gu Fei landed safely, walked over slowly and said, "Everyone is here." "Oh. Everyone. This can't go on." Gu Fei expressed his opinion. Everyone looked at him, waiting to see what he had to say. "Always swarming in like this, it's too messy, there's no beauty. Why don't we fight one-on-one?" Gu Fei said. As soon as these words came out, both sides were in an uproar. Although everyone on the Child Elite Group side thought they were extraordinary, they really didn't think they were a match for the veterans in a one-on-one fight. That kind of hooligan style of fighting without caring about the opponent's attacks, and relying on the cleric to continuously heal them from the back. Otherwise, it would be hard to say who would die if they just kept playing hooligans. In a one-on-one fight, apart from Gu Fei, everyone felt that they had no chance of winning. They didn't know why Gu Fei would come up with such a method that was extremely disadvantageous to them. And the veterans were also astonished because of this. They could also see that apart from Gu Fei, no one on the other side was a match for them. If they fought one-on-one, apart from Gu Fei, who could win? How could this guy come up with such a stupid idea to give them victory? Strange. Gu Fei really didn't seem like such a stupid person. The players on both sides looked at him as if they were looking at a third party, and they were all at a loss. Gu Fei asked again, "How about it? Do you have any objections?" Gu Fei's words were directed at the veterans. From what he said, it seemed like he was directly representing their side to negotiate with their opponents. This isn't too good. Yutian Shenming finally couldn't hold it in anymore. He didn't dare to directly say that Gu Fei's idea was stupid, but he still vaguely expressed his disapproval. What? Gu Fei was actually astonished, as if he didn't think that one of his own would reject him. This, for us, a one-on-one fight is quite difficult, right? Asking Yutian Shenming to personally admit that he couldn't beat the opponent was really too difficult for him. The little wimp vaguely expressed his meaning in the end in a roundabout way. Hearing this, Gu Fei came to a realization. He looked at his brothers who were glaring at him and said with a smile, "Are you stupid? I'm going to be the first to fight. Why would I need you guys to fight?" Hearing this, everyone understood. This was a competition. As long as Gu Fei didn't lose, there was no need to change people. This guy, was he very confident that he could take down the opponents one by one? At this time, the veterans also came to a realization. So this was this guy's plan. It wasn't that the veterans hadn't played this kind of competition before, but in reality, there was a limit to a person's physical strength. No matter how amazing an expert was, it was impossible for them to take down more than 10 fierce opponents. For a moment, they forgot that this was a game, and there was no such problem with physical strength. Gu Fei's attitude was confident to his own people, but in the eyes of his opponents, it was contempt. However, after the veterans glanced at their mountain-splitting axe, they all hung their heads in shame. Mountain-splitting axe had fought one-on-one with Gu Fei, 100 Lives strategist, and Gu Xian, and he was also the best at close combat among the veterans. After he was defeated, his words were very convincing. These people who practice kung fu are really no match for me in close combat, at least in the game. At least in the game. This suffix was because mountain-splitting axe felt that the game didn't reflect the real quality of the human body. If it was in reality, strength was the foundation of strength. Take the most ruthless Gu Xian, for example. He had a top-heavy body, and it was obvious that he lacked training. With such a guy, no matter how exquisite his kung fu moves were, mountain-splitting axe would still be able to defeat him. As for drunk Qianli and 100 Lives strategist, they were also of average build, and they didn't seem to have any explosive power. Mountain axe had lost too much, so he decided to find a way to save face elsewhere. He didn't even need to analyze the situation. In reality, he was almost a grandfather, while the other three were young and vigorous. They were the legendary 8 or 9 o'clock sons. Of course, his guess about Gu Xian was not wrong. That fellow did not train much and was extremely weak. On the other hand, Gu Fei and the 100 Eras statesmen were only not tall, but their sturdiness was far from what the mountain-splitting axe saw. Mountain-splitting axe had a lot of thoughts in his mind, but he had already admitted that he was no match for those three in the game. Did he have any chance of winning one-on-one? The veterans discussed and muttered in their channel, and finally came to a unanimous conclusion. No. Unless he makes a huge mistake, Mountain-splitting axe said solemnly. Does everyone want to bet on this? Then Old Kai, what do you think are the chances of him making a mistake? Someone asked. This person is quite skilled with his fists and legs, and his mind is extremely calm when he moves. To be honest, I don't think he will make a mistake, especially in a game where stamina isn't a problem, Mountain-splitting axe said. Then what about his concentration? If he's fighting more than 10 people in a row, it's hard to avoid mistakes if he's distracted, someone said. First, it's still the problem of stamina just now. He doesn't feel tired, and his concentration won't drop because of that. Other than that, it can only be because he's tired of fighting and has lost his mind. But comrades, pay attention to his fanatical eyes. I don't think he'll get tired of fighting 100 people, and it's impossible to make him lose his concentration with a dozen people, Mountain-splitting axe said. So you're saying that we can't fight anymore? Yes, I don't think we can fight like that, Mountain-splitting axe said. After the veterans discussed for a while, they shook their heads and rejected Gu Fei's suggestion. Gu Fei was very disappointed, and he looked at the veterans helplessly. Then what do you think we should do? Let him go, and we'll find a place to fight to the death, the veterans said. Therefore the experts also shook their heads very rudely. You know that you can't beat Qianli in a one-on-one fight, so you're not willing to fight like that. We also know that it's not easy to fight as a group. Do you think we'll agree to fight like that? Well, now everyone had something they didn't dare to do, and no one could laugh at each other. The situation was once again at a stalemate. Han family young master finally spoke. I can see that you're all masters of your words. We're not afraid to tell you that we're not his match in a head-on fight, and we're relying on crafty plots to trip him up. Wasting time like this isn't a solution, and it's meaningless for us. How about this? You guys go offline first, and we'll let him go. In the future, if we want to fight or kill each other, we'll use our own methods. Today we'll consider it a draw. A draw. The veterans almost collapsed. Apart from sniper god Old Lay Dalei, everyone else had been wiped out. Yi Xiaowu had lost 5 levels, and the opponent had 0 casualties. To say it was a draw, they really didn't know if they were giving them face, or if they were openly mocking them. But if this went on, there wouldn't be a result. You want the veterans to block the resurrection point? That wasn't realistic either. They had limited manpower, and if they all blocked the resurrection point, the opponent would be able to eat them up. This wasn't like the big guilds, who could form small teams like theirs, and each team could take turns in half an hour. This was actually a bit like what was said in the Art of War. When you have 10 times the number of enemies, you can surround them and annihilate them. Now that the ratio of both sides was close to 1-to-1, it was obvious that they really couldn't do such a big sport. After another round of discussion, the veterans finally nodded. Okay, we'll go offline first. We'll fight again later. Good, decisive. Han family young master gave them a thumbs up. The veterans immediately turned into white light and went offline. Han family young master looked at Yi Xiaowu, who was still in their circle, and said, "You go and rest too." Yi Xiaowu understood that he probably didn't want them to be seen, so he didn't say much and quietly went offline. Retreat. Han family young master waved his hand and let everyone out of the resurrection point. This ending was really all bark and no bite, especially for a battle maniac like Gu Fei. I'm not happy. People like Yu Tianshiming had already shouted out in agitation. Han family young master glanced at him. Other than 3 people, the other party was completely annihilated. It seems like the leader, Hong Chen Yixiao, lost 5 levels in a row. They seem to be the ones who are unhappy, right? Yu Tianshiming was speechless. That was indeed the case, but where did this unhappy feeling come from? Strange, Yu Tianshiming couldn't figure it out in a daze. In the end, he came up with a vague excuse. Anyway, you know. That's true. If I was as stupid as you, we would have been finished long ago. Han family young master said in disdain, but he knew in his heart that he knew. He knew he did know. Although they were the ones who won the battle, the veterans were the ones who had the upper hand from the beginning to the end. Just like what Han family young master had said, they had to play tricks to have a chance of winning. This was different from the mercenary competition. At that time, there were opponents who were 10 times their number. After winning with tricks, everyone still thought highly of themselves. But now, facing opponents who had the same number of people, although they won, the feeling of being at a disadvantage didn't change at all. Especially in the end, which seemed to have no definite conclusion. It made people feel suffocated and unable to spit it out. This was like watching a movie, adding fuel to the fire. Just as the climax of the movie was about to be reached, the electricity suddenly went out. There was nothing left, and all the emotions that had been stirred up were all suppressed back. How could this feel good? I feel that we should have stayed and fought with them again. Sword Demon, who hadn't spoken much, suddenly said, "Yes, that's right." Yu Tianshiming pulled the 3 bows on his back and said hatefully, "Games required passion and heroism." But everything that Han family young master planned would always go against this. His plan was always based on rationality, exhausting the opponent and saving himself. This kind of strategy could win the best victory, but it might not make people feel satisfied. It was just a game. Was winning really that important? Players would only feel satisfied when they were happy and excited enough. Therefore, the leader of the heaven-defying guild was supported and relied on by everyone, not the Han family young master, but Sword Demon. Chapter 641. Qianli would definitely agree with this suggestion, right? Yu Tianshiming started to form a small group. In the end, he looked left and right and went crazy. Where did Qianli go? Did he stay behind to fight? He just went offline with Hong Chen Yixiao's group. Brother, you said. They went offline together? Why did they go offline together? Could it be that Qianli wants to PK them in real life? Yutian Shenming shouted. Everyone looked at him. Brother Yu slowly said, because it's already past 11. Qianli usually goes offline at this time. Imperial Heaven Divine Ming was startled for a moment, then muttered something under his breath. Han family young master looked at everyone. No one said anything, so he ignored them and continued to lead the group forward. Jian Nanyu and the others observed this group of people with interest. Everyone became familiar with each other very quickly in the game. They weren't unfamiliar with each other anymore, but Jian Nanyu and the others felt that this child elite group wasn't a harmonious group. Simply put, this group of people's pursuits were different, especially that Han family young master. His plans were interesting, but they weren't very likable. Plus, he was the leader of the mercenary group. The 7 of them were sweating profusely. They felt that this was a group that should have been disbanded a long time ago. Actually, Han family young master's plans suited the 7 of them. They felt that it was a pity that this person didn't become a professional gamer. He wasted his talent on fighting and killing every day. It was too extravagant. Earning money was the way to go. The 7 of them thought so. The group of people walked forward silently. In the blink of an eye, a tavern appeared on the street. Han family young master was leading the group. Where else would they go? No one was surprised. One by one, they entered the tavern and impolitely asked for alcohol from the NPC. Since they couldn't fight, drinking a few cups was also a form of catharsis. Yutian Shenming wanted to go back and fight, but Gu Fei wasn't there. Yutian Shenming wanted to have a good time, but without Gu Fei, he felt that it wouldn't be good. He would most likely die, and that was something he didn't want to do. Yutian Shenming just wanted to be impulsive. He didn't want to be so stupid. The 12 of them could barely fit at the largest table in the tavern. Normally, Yutian Shenming did not drink much. Today, however, he also held a bottle of wine. Moreover, it was the most expensive bottle, 200 gold. Now he was rich and overbearing. He didn't care about numbers under 1,000 at all. However, Southfall's group of 7 remained as calm as ever. They continued to drink the most commonly drunk common liquor. Moreover, all 7 of them held 1 bottle each. Everyone opened the bottles, poured the wine and drank. Still no one spoke, and the atmosphere was deadly dull. Fire-searing Clothes looked around and slapped his poker cards on the table. He asked, "Is anyone playing?" Everyone stared at him in a daze, including his 6 brothers. Fire-searing Clothes shrunk his neck and put the poker cards back into his pocket. He raised his cup and said, "Let's drink." Fire-searing Clothes waved his cup in the air, and someone raised their hand to signal to him. With his interference, the atmosphere seemed to have recovered a little, but the child elite group still didn't speak. Southfall looked left and right and had no choice but to let him speak. "What do we do next?" As soon as he said this, Southfall froze and stared at the person in front of him. Everyone noticed his action and turned their heads to look in that direction. They immediately raised their weapons as if they were facing a formidable enemy. "Brothers, don't attack. I'm on your side now." The person hurriedly pushed his hands in front of his chest, indicating that he was empty-handed. "What?" Everyone frowned as they stared at the newcomer. No one expected this guy to appear so suddenly. The child elite group had received information from Yin Zhongmu that when Silvermoon was rescued by Yi Xiaowu, Non-Smiler also disappeared. Everyone guessed that they were on the same side. After Southfall and the others joined, they were even more certain of this. However, apart from this, Southfall and the others didn't know anything else. When they were suddenly ambushed by the veterans in the morning, they only knew that Yi Xiaowu had so many strong people around him. With such strong reinforcements, why did he spend so much money to buy their help? Southfall couldn't understand. At this moment, the table of 12 people was already filled to the brim. Moreover, no one had the intention to move a seat for Non-Smiler. Non-Smiler stood beside the table. Some people still raised their heads to look at him, but most of them had already lowered their heads and ignored him. Non-Smiler was very embarrassed. He stammered, I saw you guys fighting with Hongchen Yixiao's group." Oh. Most of the people ignored him, and those who did only snorted twice through their noses. "That guy isn't a good person. All he wants to do is make peace with this and that." Non-Smiler said. Everyone raised their heads and looked at him. Han family young master laughed coldly. From what you're saying, are you his target? Non-Smiler looked ashamed. Of course I'm not worthy, but Silvermoon's sword of the king has already been made peace with by him. What? Everyone was shocked. They had just received this news. How was it made peace? Everyone asked. That guy tricked the two of us to go to a place, and then sold our coordinates on the forum. A large number of players ran there to kill us. Silvermoon was forced to hide in the exchange. He wanted to buy a teleportation scroll and leave, so he forcefully went offline to look at his bank account. In the end, the sword of the king became the loss of forcefully going offline. Non-Smiler said. Seeing everyone's confused expressions, Non-Smiler continued. Qianli was there when he was drunk. Didn't he tell you guys? No, when was it? Everyone asked. I know. It was the day our studio opened. Brother Yu suddenly said. Everyone looked at him. Brother Yu hurriedly said. That was reported by Mumu Duo. There was also the report of Qianli being interviewed. Did you guys not see it? Qianli was interviewed by Mumu Duo? Yutian Shenming exclaimed. Yeah. Brother Yu said. I haven't even been interviewed before. Yutian Shenming muttered. Everyone present laughed but didn't say anything. They were all big names in the online gaming world, and had received these kinds of interviews before. However, Yutian Shenming didn't know what was going on. He was known as the #1 mage, but there wasn't a single online gaming reporter that wanted to interview him. This matter had always been on Yutian Shenming's mind. He didn't think that now a rising star like Gu Fei would be interviewed by a big-name reporter, while he himself was still a blank in this field. Yutian Shenming was depressed again. But the report didn't say that Silvermoon's king's sword was dropped. It only mentioned that he was forced to go offline after being trapped in the auction house. Brother Yu said. Non-Smiler nodded. He told me later. Then where is Silvermoon now? Everyone asked. He's not going to play anymore. Non-Smiler said. Is that so? Everyone suddenly heard this news and felt a burst of disappointment. Although Silvermoon was a scum, it was because of this that everyone could unscrupulously kill him. After killing him, other than being happy to vent their anger, they didn't have any psychological burden. Now that they suddenly heard that such a person had quit the game, everyone immediately felt as if they had lost something. Then this is strange. Brother Yu said. According to what you're saying, Hong Xiao spent so much effort to get you two out of Baishur City. After so many days, he thought of a way to frame you two? What is he doing? Did he make use of you two to do anything? No, Non-Smiler said. He originally gathered you guys to get drunk on Qianli, right? Brother Yu asked. That's right. Non-Smiler said and couldn't help but look at the 7 people at the table. They were originally his accomplices. In the end, he didn't make you do anything. So the entire process was to pull you out and then throw you into the fire pit. Who can explain this? Brother Yu was at a loss. He asked as he looked at the Han family young master. The Han family young master was sipping the wine in his glass. Seeing that Brother Yu had asked enough, he said. Why did Silvermoon hide in the auction house? Didn't he think that he wouldn't even be able to go offline after he was blocked there? He had no choice. Non-Smiler said he didn't have agility. If he didn't choose a nearby place to hide, he would definitely be killed. When he returned to the knight's camp, he would be blocked like before. That was no different from not being able to play the game. Was the auction house close to you guys at that time? Yes, it was just a short street. Then where did you go at that time? That. I had other ways to escape. Non-Smiler said vaguely. He didn't have the face to say that he had plotted against Silvermoon at that time, because he knew that Silvermoon was more of a target than he was, and could attract a lot of attention. The Han family's young master didn't ask for more details. Instead, he began to make his own deductions. Now that you mention it, it really does seem as if Red Dust Smile planned all of this on purpose. He already knew what the terrain would be like, and he knew that the only way to escape would be to hide in the auction house. Did he have to go through so much trouble? If he wanted to destroy Silvermoon, it would have been very simple, right? Brother Yu said. Everyone nodded. They all thought of the veterans. Silvermoon had no one to rely on. If he really wanted to destroy him, any one of the veterans would have been enough. There was no need to go through so much trouble. The Han family young master shook his head. But from the looks of it, his target might not be Silvermoon himself, but the king's sword in his hands. But hasn't the king's sword been taken away by the system? What if that was his goal? The Han family young master asked. Everyone froze and thought of the word that they hated recently, harmony. He purposely planned for Silvermoon to forcefully log off and cause the system to confiscate the king's sword? Brother, you frowned. How did he know that forcefully logging off would definitely take back the king's sword? This question. As an internal member, he might really know. The Han family young master said. Everyone was confused. Could it be that forcefully logging off actually had some sort of internal rule? Don't forget, if his target was Silvermoon himself, then he wouldn't have needed to save him at all. Letting him squat in the Whitestone City night camp was miserable enough. The Han family young master said. That. The non-smiler suddenly interrupted. After Silvermoon was taken out by him, because of his low level, he couldn't activate the king's sword. He even spent a lot of effort to help Silvermoon get a ring of leadership, which was why he was able to activate the king's sword. Did he give this ring of leadership to Silvermoon in the end? The Han family young master asked. Yes. The non-smiler nodded. On the day he schemed against us, he gave it to Silvermoon and even taught him how to use the king's sword to help kill Qianli drunk. How to use the skill? Everyone asked curiously. His battle formation skill can be used on a single target like a normal knight's blessing, but the effect is even stronger. What level was Silvermoon at that time? The Han family young master suddenly asked. Just level 38. The non-smiler said. Just leveled up? The Han family young master asked. Yes. The Han family young master frowned and swirled the wine glass in his hand. Everyone didn't even dare to breathe loudly, afraid that they would interrupt this guy's train of thought. Does Silvermoon have any money on him? The Han family young master suddenly asked a weird question. No money. The non-smiler actually answered this question smoothly. Oh, you seem to know very well. The Han family young master purposely asked. Both of our money has been deposited in the bank. The non-smiler said. Afraid of being chased? Everyone laughed. No. The non-smiler hurriedly said. Then why? Because our opponent is Qianli drunk. Everyone wiped their sweat. The threat of Gu Fei could be seen. Once they became his opponent, they wouldn't even dare to carry money on them. Silvermoon doesn't have any money on him. He just leveled up, so he doesn't have any experience. This means that if he forcefully goes offline, he won't be able to drop any experience or money. He will only drop equipment. The Han family young master said. He can't drop levels? And skills. Yutian Shiming said. Brother, you said. According to a few bored people who forcefully went offline, the most likely thing to drop is money, followed by experience, equipment, and finally skill proficiency. According to the players who tested it, a direct drop in levels has never happened before. That's right, he did a rough calculation and I recorded it down. As Brother Yu said this, he flipped through a large pile of notebooks, one after another. Finally, he flipped to the fourth book. Here it is. I only remembered the results that he calculated. Money dropped is 34% of the total number of times, experience dropped is 30%, equipment dropped is 28%, and skill proficiency dropped is 8%. Apart from these four, there haven't been any other drops. Then Silvermoon's current situation is that he has zero money, so he won't drop it. He just leveled up, so his experience is zero, so he won't drop it. If he only has equipment and skill proficiency, then the chances of him dropping equipment are too high. Brother Yu excitedly said this discovery. Even if that's the case, it's still a coincidence that he dropped the king's sword. He has a lot of stuff in his pockets and on him. Yutian Shenming said. That. When we set out, we emptied our pockets. Not Laughing said. Why? Because our opponent is Qianli drunk. Not Laughing said. Do you two have any PvP knowledge? In order to prevent the high-quality equipment from dropping, you should have brought more trash. Yutian Shenming said. That's not right. In order to reduce the chances of equipment dropping, we should have brought less stuff. South Sword and the others actually had different opinions. Chapter 642. The debate between Yutian Shenming and Jiannan Yu was a long-debated issue in the online gaming world. As players, they were unable to determine the rules of equipment drop based on scientific evidence. This required the developers of the game to reveal the details. Of course, this couldn't be made public. The system used the word probability to describe it. As such, many players believed that since it was probability, then there was a way to minimize the probability. Yutian Shenming and Jiannan Yu were talking about two completely opposite methods, but each had their own basis. Yutian Shenming's method was based on the assumption that there was a 100% chance of equipment dropping. In this case, the more equipment one had, the lower the chance of getting equipment that one didn't want to drop. If it was trash, there was nothing to worry about. Jiannan Yu's method was based on the assumption that if one didn't have any equipment, then it was impossible for equipment to drop. From this perspective, the less equipment one had, the closer to having no equipment at all. As such, the chance of equipment dropping was close to zero. The two arguments went on for a long time. Both sides were able to come up with a bunch of vivid examples to prove their point. In the end, everyone chose the side that they believed in, and did what they believed in. Currently, there were more followers of Yutian Shenming, while Jiannan Yu's side had fewer followers. The two of them continued to argue about this old problem for a while. Suddenly, they both realized a problem. The players would argue like this because they didn't understand the game settings. However, if that red dust smile was an internal member of the game company. Did Hongchen Yixiao give you any hints like this? Everyone asked Nonlaugh. Nonlaugh had a look of realization on his face. No, because he didn't need it. Silvermoon believed in this method. So, before we fought Qianli, he only had the king's sword, right? Han family young master asked. There was another ring of leadership to activate the equipment, Nonlaugh said. The probability is high enough. Han family young master nodded and looked at the crowd. Isn't it clear now? After Hongchen Yixiao understood Silvermoon's habits, he also knew that they were afraid of Qianli, so he specially arranged such a good show. Forcefully logging off would result in losses, and the probability of this was extremely high. Otherwise, the officials wouldn't have emphasized it over and over again. Using this method to obtain equipment seems to be much more ruthless than PvP. But Silvermoon went offline because he didn't remember his bank account number. If he remembered, said the non-smiler. It's useless to remember. If I'm not wrong, there shouldn't be a single teleportation scroll in the auction house. All he had to do was sweep them clean. Teleportation scrolls aren't something that anyone can just consign to sell. Han family young master said. They're really going all out. Unscathed in battle exclaimed. That's not a big deal. He can just sell it later. It won't be much of a loss anyway, said Han family young master. Silvermoon. The crowd repeated the name, and didn't know what to say. Originally, this guy was hated by everyone, but now that he was schemed against by Yi Xiaowu, everyone felt like they were in the same boat. So this guy found Silvermoon early on to get rid of the king's sword? Brother Yu said. Looks like it. Damn. What's the meaning of this? High-level equipment can't be used anymore, right? If that's the case, then there should be a level limit for equipment. Now that there's no level limit, low-level players can get rid of high-level equipment. What the hell is this? Can this game still be played? Yutian Shenming jumped up. Although Silvermoon hadn't officially confirmed the origin of the king's sword, everyone had basically accepted the legend. Back then, the boss had invaded Moonlit City and was forced to be killed by the NPC soldiers. In the end, an equipment was dropped, and that equipment was the king's sword. Silvermoon was the lucky one who picked it up. According to Yi Xiaowu's logic, the king's sword shouldn't have appeared under normal circumstances, so he wanted to get rid of it. It wasn't that high-level equipment couldn't appear in the hands of low-level players. Although Han family young master and the others understood this, no one would speak up for Yi Xiaowu. Everyone happily listened to Yutian Shenming's furious curses. After Yu Tianshunming was tired of cursing and drinking, Brother Yu asked unsmilingly, "It's understandable that Silvermoon was tricked by that guy because of the king's sword, but what's the reason for you? Do you have any equipment of unknown origin?" "I don't have any," unsmilingly said, feeling wronged. His dagger, Wind Whisper, with the vanished skill was a proper quest reward. Moreover, the dagger's attributes seemed outdated, so it couldn't possibly be a top equipment like the king's sword. Apart from that, there was nothing special about his equipment. "I'm afraid he didn't just do it for equipment," Jiannan suddenly said. Jiannan suddenly said, "He even looked for us. We don't have any special equipment." "Your shield?" Unscathed in battle blurted out. Jiannan was a two-handed berserker, but he used a shield. In theory, it was impossible for him to have the shield coefficient to fully utilize the power of his equipment. However, reality proved that Jiannan shield's defense wasn't bad. Jiannan laughed and took out his shield from his pocket. "Actually, this isn't a shield, it's also a sword." Everyone's eyes widened. Just as Jiannan had said, his equipment was called Guardian Sword. It looked like a shield, but its name and coefficient were all swordsmanship. However, where it should have attack power, the sword's attribute was defense. This was the same as a shield. "Where did you get it?" Unscathed in battle immediately asked. "I got it from a boss," Jiannan said. "What boss?" Unscathed in battle continued to ask. The bosses in the parallel world were hard to come by, so there was no such thing as waiting for them. Although he knew that even if he knew what boss it was, it would be difficult for him to defeat it, Unscathed in battle wouldn't give up until he reached the Yellow River. Jiannan helplessly smiled bitterly. "Pirate Jack, have you heard of him? He's from Waterfront City." Unscathed in battle didn't know. He immediately turned his head to look at Brother Yu. "Pirate Jack? Isn't he the one who drives a boat between the various islands in Waterfront City?" Brother Yu asked. As expected of Brother Yu, Jiannan praised. Brother Yu looked at Unscathed in battle and shook his head. "Don't count on it. If you want to defeat this boss, it's more dependent on luck than any other boss. Think about the terrain of Waterfront City. If this boss uses a boat to travel between the various islands, no one knows which island he will dock on. How are you going to defeat him?" Unscathed in battle was very depressed. He sighed and didn't say anything else. "Where were we?" Han family young master expressionlessly asked. Jiannan was startled, then continued the previous topic. "That Hongchen Yixiao looked for so many of us. Apart from Silvermoon's king's sword, none of us have any equipment that will be his target. If he looked for you guys, you wouldn't have done it for nothing, right?" Han family young master suddenly asked. Everyone already knew about this, but to avoid embarrassment, no one asked too much. Especially the person involved, Gu Fei, who had an indifferent attitude. 20,000 gold coins per level. Jiannan remembered the agreement. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. It wasn't easy to make these guys gasp in surprise. Right now, all of them were rich people. If they didn't have the efficient leveling method, 20,000 gold coins per level was enough to make a rash guy like Yu Tianshunming explode. 20,000 gold coins per level. Han family young master sneered. "If we can't even kill a single level, wouldn't it be equivalent to doing it for nothing?" Jiannan was startled. Although there was a deposit, it was still a small amount. He suddenly remembered that the agreement at that time was that they had to completely accept Yi Xiaowu's command. Although he asked to know the details of the operation in advance, the real success or failure was still in the hands of this commander. If he deliberately did not want to pay the 20,000 gold coins, then why did he do this? Brother Yu asked Han family young master. This guy has already recruited that group of veterans. With such strong people, theoretically, he doesn't need more external help. Don't forget, under normal circumstances, there are only 6 of us. That guy's imaginary opponents are also the 6 of us. Don't tell me he thought that Jiannan and the others would team up with us. And that a guy like 100 Era's Jinglu would suddenly team up with us? Han family young master said. Everyone nodded. So these normal players that he found can only do one thing for us, and that's to buy time. Han family young master said. Buy time? Buy time for what? Everyone asked. We need to get into his stupid head again, Brother Yu. I can't get into his head this time either. Brother Yu's face darkened. I knew you couldn't do it. The young master of the Han family looked at him in disdain and directly analyzed. From his point of view, Qianli's existence in the game is a kind of danger. He's a time bomb that could explode at any time and cause some trouble. His purpose isn't just to harmonize with Qianli. Everyone hasn't forgotten what he did in Shady Forest City, right? Everyone nodded. As for the veterans, they're all new to the game, so they've been working hard to level up for a certain period of time. No matter how skilled they are in real life, level is still the basis of confrontation in the game. Judging from the level of these people when they attacked, probably at the beginning, his plan was for these people to rush to level 40 before taking action. Then before that, he has a vacuum period without manpower. But he doesn't feel at ease letting this time bomb, Qianli, float outside, so he needs to find something for Qianli to do. Han family young master said. Brother Yu's eyes lit up. So he gathered a group of players who had a grudge with Qianli. In fact, they're a group of bait. Their purpose is to attract Qianli's attention and let Qianli fight with these people. For the time being, he won't have the time to invest in other content of the game. From his point of view, there's no danger of destroying the game. Then, when the veterans have formed their level, they take action and completely defuse this time bomb. Not bad. Han family young master nodded approvingly. You're really suitable to get into his stupid head. Chapter 643. Brother Yu was very calm and didn't react to Han family young master's mockery. Jiannanyu frowned as if he was thinking about something. But after that, he didn't discuss any further cooperation with you guys, right? Han family young master said. Jiannanyu nodded. Yi Xiaowu said that he didn't have enough money and wanted to gather more, but they didn't contact each other again. But in reality, what you guys were doing at that time happened to stall Qianli. Han family young master said. Everyone thought back. Wasn't that right? At that time, because of the vast and boundless ideal staff, everyone was impatient. However, Gu Fei persistently chased after Jiannanyu and the others endlessly. Thinking back to those gloomy days, Jiannanyu and the others felt like vomiting. They realized that their current happy life wasn't easy to come by and needed to be cherished. Now let's think about the role Hongqian Yixiao played in the magic staff incident. Han family young master knocked on the table and turned to ask Non-Smiler. How much do you know about this? Non-Smiler had been talking to everyone for a long time since he came in. Yet he was still standing at the side like a servant. The 12 of them still had no intention of giving him a place to sit. This fellow was really patient, standing there and talking to everyone. As far as I know, this was instigated by Silvermoon. Because the magic staff's mana replenishment skill was very useful for his king's command skill, he convinced Yi Xiaowu to buy this magic staff. After getting Yi Xiaowu's agreement, he turned around and bought the magic staff from Jiannanyu and the others. Non-Smiler said. Magic staff. Yu Tianshiming was puzzled. The trade of equipment drops is called magic staff in our industry. Jiannanyu explained and glanced at Non-Smiler. This was like the slang in the industry. If Non-Smiler could say it, it meant that his hands weren't clean. At the very least, he was familiar with the robbers. Yu Tianshiming was also an expert, but he was very pure and didn't understand this kind of slang. Then Jiannanyu and the others got in touch during this time, said the Non-Smiler. Jiannanyu nodded and confirmed the situation. Then, Boundless Mang Mang consigned the staff to be sold. Now tell me, what kind of trap is this staff consignment sale? Since the two sides were only at the beginning of their cooperation, for the sake of harmony, they subconsciously avoided talking about some of the past conflicts, lest they become impulsive and fall out with each other. As Jiannanyo's group of 7, who had been at a disadvantage all this while, they really wanted to know more. Seeing that the opportunity was good, they took the opportunity to ask. Nothing. It's just a plan to trick you into showing up. Han family young master said lightly. See, I told you so. Jiannan said to his brothers. What was Hongqian Yixiao's reaction when I consigned the staff? Asked the Han family young master. As soon as he said this, the Non-Smiler and Jiannanyu said in unison. He came to the auction. And Glue told them about how he met Hongchen Yixiao at the auction, and how he said with certainty that there was a 99% chance that the staff was bought by a buyer. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for anyone to beat his auctioning skills. Auctioning skills? Everyone was puzzled. I asked him too. He said he knew the pattern of price fluctuations and could successfully bid before anyone else, said Glue. Then if it's really as he said, it's really a 0.1% chance of coincidence? Everyone muttered. There's another possibility, said the Han family young master. What? Everyone asked. He's lying. You can't even think of that? Han family young master rolled his eyes. Lying? You mean he actually bought the staff, but purposely said he didn't have it? Brother, you said. That way no one knows who the buyer is, but they all want the staff back. It doesn't matter if it's the mantis, the oriole, or the cicada. As long as the buyer doesn't take the staff, everyone will be stuck here for a week, said the Han family young master. That way he can pin down Qianli so he doesn't have the energy to do anything. Brother, you said. A week. When the veterans reach level 40, they can start fighting. Jian Nan came to a realization. Even though it wasn't his plan, Silvermoon and you all have been used by him unknowingly, said the Han family young master. Damn it. Jian Nanyu slammed his fist on the table. Although his original job was to be a tool for others, it was precisely because of this that he hated the feeling of being kept in the dark and being used as a tool. So you're saying that the staff is in Hongchen Yixiao's hands? Brother, you said. Impossible. Jian Nan immediately said, we haven't relaxed our surveillance, and in the end, it wasn't even our family that kept an eye on it. No one took away the ideal staff. Do you know? The Han family young master turned to the non-smiler again. The non-smiler shook his head. I don't know. After the auction ended, we went back to Shady Forest City together. We only came back recently. Or maybe he didn't even think about taking the staff. He treated the staff like the king's sword and just threw it there for the system to retrieve, said the Han family young master. He's really generous. Everyone muttered. The Han family young master suddenly froze and looked at the non-smiler. You mean you went back to Shady Forest City after that? The non-smiler nodded. What will happen if we collect the items from the Baishur auction house in Shady Forest City? The Han family young master suddenly said. It shouldn't work, right? Brother, you said casually. After he finished speaking, he also realized the problem. Whether this can work or not, the system didn't say. It's even more impossible for players to have this kind of experience, said the Han family young master. Everyone nodded. Basically, players were limited to their own main city, so this kind of thing really couldn't happen. Could it be that the auction is limited to the main city, but the collection is a cross-city service? Brother, you speculated. We can try this, said the Han family young master. We'll auction something in a while, go to the nearby main city and see if we can get it. It'll take a lot of time. Blackwater, Glue, Yutian Shunming, and the others laughed dryly. This kind of running work would obviously fall to the agility professions like them. The Han family young master's experimental plan was quite unpopular with them. It's okay if you're too lazy to run. Recently, there are a lot of people walking around in the main city. I'll see if there are any friends who can help with the experiment, and we'll know, said Brother Yu. Everyone nodded. Recently, there were indeed a lot of players walking around, and it was all because of the efficient leveling method. There were constantly people coming to observe. How was the situation at the White Mill? They hadn't gone back to check after the lesson ended. There's a little problem, Unsmiler suddenly said. This guy had been standing there like a prisoner while being interrogated, and now that he took the initiative to speak, he seemed to have mustered up a lot of courage. Say it, said the Han family young master. About the magic staff at the end of the auction. I secretly heard that Hongchen Yixiao also said that he didn't get water-breaking arrow. If he's deliberately deceiving us, I don't think he would do that to water-breaking arrow. They trust each other, and water-breaking arrow must be very clear about his specific plan, Unsmiler said. He still remembered that before he and Silvermoon set off, Hongchen Yixiao and water-breaking arrow were working together to put on a show. Obviously, water-breaking arrow knew the whole plan. which meant that he was the partner that Hongchen Yixiao absolutely trusted. Haha. The Han family's young master laughed. The fact that you heard it in private is enough to explain the problem. What do you mean? Unsmiler was puzzled. Acting. It's for people like you who heard it in private to hear, said the Han family young master. This Unsmiler had indeed mingled with the crowd at the auction house and tried his best to get close to Yi Xiaowu and the others. This guy had been trying to secretly get some information that Yi Xiaowu had. You said that he didn't know at the beginning that Silvermoon said he was going to buy a magic staff, but in fact, he was going to buy a single burst magic staff, right? Said the Han family young master. Unsmiler nodded. But later on he got in touch with Jian Nanyu and the others, so how could he not know? Said the Han family young master. This we didn't say it. We always keep secrets for our customers, even if the customer is Silvermoon. Jian Nanyu said. Then when another magic staff appeared in the auction house, how did Silvermoon explain it to Hongchen Yixiao? Hongchen Yixiao couldn't have not asked about it, right? That magic staff was auctioned by Boundless Mang, and it had a lot to do with Silvermoon, said the Han family young master. I'm not too sure. Regarding the magic staff, they mostly talked about it in private. I didn't participate in it. It was precisely because of this reason that Unsmiler was afraid that Silvermoon would be able to monopolize it, so he always tried to get involved. It seems like there's no way to know what he and Silvermoon talked about at that time. The Han family young master said regretfully, but I'm sure that Hongchen Yixiao realized that this magic staff had a lot to do. So he put on a show at the auction house because he knew that there must be a lot of eyes and ears in the auction house. Your people, our people. He had absolute confidence that he would be able to get the magic staff, so he created a situation where no buyer appeared, and so everyone was dragged there. Everyone buried their heads in thought. It sounded unimaginable, but it wasn't impossible. If it was a normal buyer, a 0.1% chance of getting the magic staff would be the limit. In the end, after buying it, he actually didn't want it. How do you calculate the probability? Said the Han family young master. Looks like the magic staff really is in this guy's hands. Brother, you hurry and ask your friend to test it out. See if anyone wants to move, said the Han family young master. I'll go find someone right now. Brother, you directly sent a group message. This guy, he's really fucking. Everyone didn't know what to say other than cursing, because there was a very important problem that everyone realized. This Hongchen Yixiao spent so much effort to deal with Qianli, but to him, he didn't get any benefits at all. The king's sword was such a high-quality equipment, but he directly let the system take it back without any hesitation. If it was any other player who would be willing to give it up. This guy, why was he so stubborn? Just how much of a grudge did he have against Qianli? Everyone thought to themselves. Everyone thought about their own things. In the end, when they turned around, Non-Smiler was still standing there. Is there anything else? Asked the Han family young master. That, we're all in the same boat. I also want to join you guys to deal with Hongchen Yixiao. Non-Smiler finally revealed his purpose for coming here. This guy, ever since he arrived, he had a pitiful look on his face. He had been standing by the table for 3 minutes, yet he didn't show any signs of displeasure. He wanted to gain the sympathy of these experts. He had already seen through it. Rather than thinking of ways to take revenge for the level 10 incident, he might as well lower himself and wag his tail in front of these experts. It was pitiful, but in the future he would be able to eat and drink well. He had heard about Qianli's drunk studio. He had even personally witnessed the grand teaching in the wee hours of the morning. 1 person for 99 gold. How many people were there? Non-Smiler had completely lost his self-esteem. Stupid. Look at Jian Nanyu, he's so fucking self-aware. Why didn't I realize it earlier? Why should I go against these people? If I stand on their side, even the guys from the 10 Meetings Alliance wouldn't dare to look down on me. When Non-Smiler saw that Jian Nanyu and the other 6 were getting along well with Gu Fei, he was even more confident. In his mind, the matter between him and Gu Fei was something that had happened many years ago. Moreover, it was because of July. There was no hatred between them. Now that he was begging for mercy, they wouldn't let him off. What was even better was that he chose a time when Gu Fei wasn't around. This way, he wouldn't even have a direct conflict with them. Once his friends accepted him, Qianli wouldn't be able to say anything when he was drunk, right? Thinking of his own wishful thinking, Unsmiley cried out in his heart. He felt that the table in front of him was about to have a 13th chair. It was a little crowded, but it was comfortable. Non-Smiler tried hard not to laugh out loud. He continued to put on a fearful and pleading expression. I don't think it's necessary. Look, someone's looking for you. Han family young master said. Non-Smiler was startled. He looked in the direction that Han family young master was pointing. A bunch of girls. How honored would it be for any player to be approached by a bunch of girls? If it was those guys who lived forever in the flower bush, it would be a wonderful thing that they would laugh out loud in their dreams. However, for Non-Smiler, other than Qianli holding a sword in front of him when he was drunk, there was nothing more terrifying than the appearance of a bunch of girls. Why are you talking for so long? It's getting late. I still want to sleep. The first one to jump out from the group of girls was the female thief in red. She glared at the people at the table with dissatisfaction. Behind her Luoluo July fiercely Junrain. A group of girls who had reincarnated into Amethyst were all rubbing their palms together. You. Non-Smiler looked at Han family young master in sudden realization. He didn't know what expression to make. Fall out with him? Get angry? Continue to beg him? I'm sorry I sold you out. Han family young master smiled. Looking at the others, it seemed like they didn't notice this at all. Half of them were still thinking about Hong Chenxiao's scheme. Why are there so many of you here? Didn't you leave someone in the Thieves' Guild? Han family young master asked. Why should we? We don't have the time to do that. We can just kill them all. Slender Waist Dance had already rushed forward. Chapter 644. Naturally, Non-Smiler was in an extremely bad mood at the moment, but Sir Han was still in his mocking mode, continuing to make sarcastic remarks. Brother, you want to join us? Don't you know the name of our mercenary group? Child Elite Group. Elite, did you hear that? Do you think it's appropriate for you to join us? Unscathed in Battle laughed and chimed in. He's an elite? I think he's just an elite. That. Zhan Wuxiang had originally wanted to shamelessly use the word elite on Non-Smiler, but he suddenly realized that a large group of ladies had already rushed over. If he said that, it would be too damaging to his image in front of the ladies, so he hurriedly stopped himself from doing so. But in his heart he felt that his idea was too amazing, and he was very anxious if he didn't say it out loud. The others had already realized what this guy wanted to say. When they saw his pained expression because of the bunch of girls, Brother Yu patted him and said, All right, we know. Yeah, ha ha ha. Unscathed in Battle was very happy. Everyone had actually understood his wonderful idea, and this made him much happier. Fuck. Non-Smiler could no longer pretend to be a coward. He immediately took out his knife and pounced towards Han family young master in front of him. Han family young master didn't care about him at all. He didn't even try to dodge. He cast healing spells on himself while taking care of his wine glass, as if the wine in the glass was more important than his life. Non-Smiler was depressed. There was a difference in equipment between the two of them. His damage was incomparable to Han family young master's healing. Although a combat class like him would still have the upper hand if they continued to wear each other down, where would he find the chance to continue? Thin Waist Dance had already danced in front of him like a whirlwind. Not Laughing didn't want to sit and wait for death, but he felt that it was too difficult to escape. He had originally wanted to fight to the death with young Master Han, and perish together with him. In the end, he saw that his attack was not enough in front of the other party. Perishing together was just a pipe dream. He tried his best to find a chance to escape, so he gave up on attacking Han family young master, and went into stealth. In the end, the group of girls who had rushed up had actually used gunny sacks to spill the white lime. Not to mention Buxiao, even the 12 people at the table were covered in dirt. The pitiful young Master Han would rather be stabbed than to protect the half cup of wine, but in an instant, it had turned into a cup of mud. Fuck! Han family young master was furious, slamming the table and standing up. Non-Smiler was overjoyed. He felt that the rash actions of the girls had offended someone they shouldn't have offended. Now he had a chance to take advantage of the chaos. In the end, the young master of the Han family, a dignified cleric, raised his leg and kicked at Non-Smiler without a care for his image. He no longer looked like an expert player. Instead, he looked more like a street thug. He didn't know if this kick was too sudden, but the Non-Smiler actually couldn't avoid it, and was kicked by the Han family's young master. A mere cleric's flying kick wouldn't hurt him, but Non-Smiler was kicked to the point where he wanted to cry but had no tears. These guys really have no manners. Did I spill the dust myself? Why are they venting their anger on me? But this kick wasn't the end. There were 12 people at the table. Han family young master was worried about his liquor, and the others were worried about their equipment and hairstyles. Now all of them had silver hair. What did they look like? Everyone at the table bared their teeth and stood up, surrounding the Non-Smiler. The girls were anxious. This prey was theirs. Don't snatch it. I'll kill whoever tries. Slender Waist Dance threatened loudly. The others didn't dare to move. They weren't strangers to Slender Waist Dance. They knew this girl's personality very well. If she was angered, she would really stab you. There was no room for negotiation. The other girls were also anxious. They chased after Slender Waist Dance and shouted, "Slow down, little dance. Let us hit him." Non-Smiler was sad. He was a living person, but he was being treated like a punching bag. If Slender Waist Dance were to stab him, Non-Smiler would most likely be dead. This girl was never modest with others, but she was very protective of her own girl. Hearing that everyone wanted to stab Non-Smiler, she didn't end it so quickly. She gave way and gestured for the others to go first. The girls weren't like male players at all. Before, they were fighting to be the first. Now that they were in front of each other, they became friendly. They pushed each other and gave the chance to the others to stab him first. Han family young master didn't hold back. He kicked Non-Smiler a few more times. Non-Smiler was already surrounded. He knew he couldn't survive, but he couldn't just be kicked around by a cleric. This guy was waving his knife and kicking like crazy. Since he didn't want to live anymore, he didn't want to be kicked around by a cleric. Han family young master saw that this guy was going crazy. He picked up the liquor on the table and threw it at him. The liquor in the cup was mixed with lime and mud. It smashed on Non-Smiler's face. "Eyes!" Non-Smiler yelled and cupped his face with both hands. He forgot that he was holding a dagger in his hand and stabbed himself in the forehead. Stabbing oneself was also harmful. A smear of blood flowed down from the Non-Smiler's forehead, mixing with the wine and lime on his face. His face was completely ruined. At this time, the girls also gave way. Who was more qualified and justified than July to give the first punch? July stood up under the recommendation of the girls. To be honest, the matter between her and Non-Smiler had been in the past for a long time. The feelings of the past were long gone, and hatred was out of the question. If she hated, it meant that she still cared. July had long treated Non-Smiler as a stranger. She came to Whitestone City after receiving the news. In fact, it was mostly due to the urging of hot-blooded girls like Slender Waist Dance and Fiercely. To put it bluntly, the Emperor was not in a hurry to kill the eunuch. July didn't feel anything wrong, but they felt that it was very refreshing to come and help July vent her anger. The girls were united and friendly. Everyone supported this activity. July didn't want to disappoint everyone, so she came along. Now that everyone wanted her to give the first punch, she didn't stand on ceremony. Although she didn't take Non-Smiler seriously anymore, it was still fun to beat him up. Non-Smiler had just stabbed himself in the head, and was shouting helplessly. In the end, he felt the bridge of his nose suddenly sink. He had already taken a heavy punch. July was thin and weak, but she was a grandmaster of combat. This punch was even more destructive than a warrior's punch. Non-Smiler's body tilted on the spot. His eyes couldn't see, so it was even more difficult to maintain balance. He waved his hands and grabbed the back of an empty chair. He pushed back hard, and the chair flipped. Non-Smiler also fell to the ground. There were many people in the tavern. Non-Smiler looked extremely miserable, but in reality, this was a PK. Non-Smiler wasn't a great beauty, so it really didn't attract the interest of the players to help. Everyone watched silently from the side. Non-Smiler fell to the ground, and for a moment, no one went up to trample on him. This guy still couldn't open his eyes. One hand was still holding the dagger, and the other hand was on the ground. He suddenly jumped up and continued to crazily slash left and right. He was still shouting, "Come on! Come again! I'm not afraid of you! Don't go up first! Let him go crazy!" Luoluo saw that Fiercely was about to go up and give Non-Smiler a second punch. Instead, she stopped her and signaled for everyone to leave a circle for this guy to go crazy. Child Elite Group and Jian Nanyu's group of 7 silently followed her instructions and moved to the side. But in their hearts, they were all muttering, "Who said that women were soft-hearted? Look at this girl, she's ruthless. She really wants to play Non-Smiler to death." Non-Smiler spun around crazily until he was dizzy, but he still didn't touch anyone. He shouted blindly at the top of his voice, but no one responded at all. No one in the tavern spoke a word. Everyone watched quietly, watching as this guy roared and jumped like he was having a stroke. After a while, Non-Smiler himself also felt that the situation was strange. What was going on? Why was it so quiet? After Non-Smiler stopped shouting, he found that there was not a sound around him. Where is everyone? Non-Smiler was puzzled. He also stopped his crazy actions, and when he had the time, he hurriedly rubbed his eyes. With difficulty, he opened his eyes and looked forward in a blur. Everyone was there. Just as he came back to his senses, his nose sank again. A fist had already smashed into the bridge of his nose. This time it was Fiercely who attacked. He was much more ruthless than July. This punch didn't even give Non-Smiler a chance to hold the chair, and he directly fell backwards. In the end, before he could fall, he was grabbed by the collar. Non-Smiler looked up and saw a female warrior. Her face was still covered in dust. Seeing Non-Smiler look at her, she smiled back at him. She raised her arm, and Non-Smiler was already lifted up. The female warrior swung her arms like a windmill, swinging Non-Smiler around. Then she loosened her grip, and Non-Smiler flew out. The players where he landed screamed and dodged everywhere. They really didn't expect this person to be thrown to them. Non-Smiler landed on a table and 3 chairs. July and Luoluo hurriedly went over to apologize to the frightened players. She turned back and complained, "Little Rain, don't be so rash. It's not good to hit people, and if you hit a table, you have to pay for it." Slender Waist Dance laughed boldly. "It's fine. Do whatever you want. Today's expenses are all on me." "Really? That's great." June Rain was very happy. She waved her hand and smashed another table beside her. I didn't mean it like that." Slender Waist Dance was stunned. She didn't mean to destroy tables and chairs as entertainment. This little Rain was really too muddle-headed. Non-Smiler took 2 punches and a fall. Han Family Young Master kicked him several times. Unfortunately, this series of attacks didn't do much damage. As a thief, he was still alive and kicking. Thinking that he didn't know what crueler methods were coming, he just lay on the ground and didn't get up. "You're playing dead." Slender Waist Dance prepared to pick him up. "Little Dance, be careful. This guy is very cunning," Luoluo hurriedly said. "I'm afraid of him," Slender Waist Dance said in disdain. She walked over and stomped on him twice. "Get up." Non-Smiler didn't move. He was determined to play dead. People who were shameless were invincible. Once he started acting shamelessly, no one could do anything about it. Most of the girls were still mild in temperament, unlike Slender Waist Dance and Fierce Blaze who were hot-tempered. They also did not argue over whether or not they should be punched or kicked. Seeing that it was about time, they did not argue anymore. Slender Waist Dance cleanly took care of the Non-Smiler with a single slash. Everyone in the tavern let out a long breath. Everyone deeply understood a truth. Women shouldn't be offended. Awesome. Although Slender Waist Dance's final slash wasn't very exciting, seeing Non-Smiler being tormented like that was already very satisfying. She loudly announced her feelings in her heart. Han Family Young Master and the rest of the 12 were also cleaning up the sacks of white lime that were scattered by the girls. It wasn't just them. The victims of that sprinkle were countless. However, seeing that it was a bunch of girls, everyone tolerated it. Unscathed in battle, Yu Shunming was shamelessly cleaning up while trying to flirt with people. Thanks. If you find his whereabouts again, let us know. Slender Waist Dance said. Isn't he in the Thief Guild now? Why don't we continue to chase after him? Unscathed in battle and Yu Shunming volunteered. They liked to do activities with the girls. It was much more interesting than teaching with these guys. However, before the girls could reply, the two were already arguing. Yu Shunming looked at Unscathed in battle. Why the hell are you chasing after him? Can those 2 elephant legs of yours outrun one of his fingers? Unscathed in battle didn't want to be outdone. He immediately retorted. You can chase after him? Do you know where the sun is when you walk out of this door? Don't you dare chase him into outer space. Alright, stop arguing. What's the point of chasing? It's a waste of time. If you see him, just kill him. The girls had leveled up with Unscathed in battle and Yu Shunming. They had spent more time with these two than Gu Fei, so they were more familiar with them. Of course, they didn't have to be so polite when talking to them. The two of them were snubbed, so they sighed and didn't say anything. The girls weren't in a hurry to leave. They gathered around them and asked about efficient leveling methods. There's no use asking us. We're just a bunch of workers. You can ask Qianli when he comes online tomorrow. Han Family Young Master said. He saw that the girls wanted to ask for help through the back door. It was only human nature. Han Family Young Master didn't mind at all. However, they really couldn't help at all. The next leveling area would have to be developed by Gu Fei's 100 Lives of Wisdom. What could they do with their current group of people? When Unscathed appeared at the resurrection point, he was still lying on the ground. Even when he dropped 10 levels in a row, it couldn't compare to the grievance he felt now. He had already abandoned his pride to smile at others. He thought that he wouldn't slap a smiling person. Who would have thought that he would be slapped so badly? At this moment, Non-Smiler really had a feeling that in this vast world, where was his home? Was there any meaning in continuing this game? What fun could he have? Unscathed thought blankly. The girls talked to Han Family Young Master about the efficient leveling method. They were all quite jealous of the huge income. Brother Yu suddenly had an idea and asked if they wanted to join him. Brother Yu wasn't a kind person. The girls' gaming skills were mediocre. It wasn't practical to ask them to fight monsters and teach them. However, it was a good idea to hire a group of female secretaries for the delicate work of sorting out and replying to letters. Although the leaders of this business, Gu Fei and encyclopedic statesmen, were not around, Brother Yu had already seen through their temperaments. Even if he acted first and reported later, the two of them would not mind. Gu Fei didn't care about this at all. Gu Fei Jingluan wasn't someone who would make a fuss just because there were a few more people to share the money. On the other hand, Jian Nanyo's group of 7 wanted to reduce the number of people, so that they could get a bigger share. However, after the battle at the White Mill, the 7 of them knew that it was impossible for them to monopolize this job. The workload was too heavy. Sword Ghost and the others had also set up a temporary labor system. Now they were indeed short of manpower. Since they were short of manpower, why not get a few girls to pair up with men and women? When Jian Nanyu and the others had nothing to do, they often lamented that their team was full of men. It would be more harmonious and beautiful if there were 1 or 2 girls. Brother Yu introduced the work of the studio, especially the task of sorting out and replying to letters that was to be undertaken by the ladies. The ladies weren't stupid, especially Luoluo, who was a smart girl. After listening to them, they asked about their business and casually did some calculations. They knew that the job of sorting out and replying to letters was just a few words, but it would definitely take a lot of time and effort to do it. However, the remuneration was too generous. Each of these people could earn 200,000 from a single deal. No one could resist such a figure. Other than Slender Waist Dance, who never lacked money and never thought of earning money in the game, the other girls were tempted. However, Amethyst had a total of 50 members. The girls were harmonious and friendly, and they were willing to share good things. At this moment, some of the girls who didn't come to White Stone City received the news through the guild channel. July meant that it was up to them to decide whether they wanted to do it or not. If they wanted to do it, they would do it. Anyway, Qianli was considered one of them, and the others weren't strangers. Thus, the girls chattered and discussed, analyzing the pros and cons. However, Brother Yu had already calculated it for them. When he saw that the girls were hesitating and no one gave a definite answer, he smiled and said, "Your guild has more than 50 people. To be honest, if all of you participate, it'll be very chaotic with so many people. Moreover, if there are too many people, the amount of money that will be distributed to each person will be much smaller." When the girls heard this, some of them who were still weighing whether they wanted to do it or not showed a relieved expression. "If that's the case, then I won't go. The other girls can go." The girls thought that Brother Yu meant that they didn't need too many people, so some of them began to give way. "Wait, everyone, let me finish." Brother Yu quickly said, "We've profited a lot from this. Other than Qian Li and 100 Eras Classics who took the biggest cut from our last deal, everyone else got 250,000 yuan. When Brother Yu said this, he suddenly paused and looked at South Sword and the others. He continued, "These brothers are professional players who rely on this to support their families. Their situation is different from us. For us ordinary players, 250,000 is used in the game. With the current prices in the game, as long as the money isn't wasted, who knows how long it'll take to use it up. It's enough to be rich for a long time. So what I mean is, as long as you don't really rely on this money to eat, everyone can take turns. Today, the 4 of us will get 250,000. Tomorrow, the 4 of them will get 250,000. In this way, everyone will have money to use in the end, and we'll move towards common prosperity. Isn't that great?" Brother Yu said with a smile. "Butterfly not. Today, there's a multiple choice question. Do you think Silvermoon or Unsmiler is more miserable?" Chapter 645. When the ladies heard this, they felt that Brother Yu's idea was very much to their liking. How long could 250,000 be spent? This was not how the ladies considered the problem. They were thinking, how many beautiful pieces of equipment can 250,000 buy? That's a great idea. Luoluo nodded and asked, "Qianli isn't here. He won't have any objections, right?" No. Brother Yu quickly replied. Luoluo looked at the Han family young master suspiciously. Previously, this guy said that they were just part-time workers, and that Qianli was the boss. He said that he had to ask Qianli if he had any questions. Now that Qianli wasn't here, they directly decided to recruit people. What was going on? The Han family young master was too lazy to explain. He just sat there and drank his wine without saying a word. Yutian Shunming and Unscathed in Battle started to feel restless. When they saw Brother Yu introducing the job content and some details to the ladies, the two of them looked at each other and smiled flatteringly. "Brother Yu, we've decided to be permanent workers." "Permanent workers?" Brother Yu was stunned. Didn't you say that we're temporary workers?" The two of them smiled awkwardly. Now we suddenly feel that it's better to be permanent workers." Brother Yu finally understood. When he thought about it, he knew that the two of them saw that there were ladies joining them and immediately wanted to stick to them like a dog's skin plaster. However, this made Brother Yu feel a little awkward. It was because the few of them were unwilling to do long-term work that they hired external helpers. Now that the two of them had gone back on their word and wanted to go back to work, the more people there were, the less money everyone would get in the end. In that case, he could not make the decision directly. No matter what, he had to ask the others for their opinions. Did they want more people to save effort and less money? Or to work harder and get more money? Thinking of this, Brother Yu looked at Jian Nanyu and the other 6. He mainly wanted their opinion. These people were really after money. Brother Yu had already asked for their opinion before looking for people to join them. Jian Nanyu and the other 6 naturally understood their intention. They didn't know whether to laugh or cry. 2 more people wouldn't be able to get much money. The 7 of them weren't so petty. Of course, they didn't have any opinion. Jian Nanyu sent a private message to Brother Yu. "Do as you see fit. We have no opinion." Of course, Brother Yu wouldn't refuse their request. However, he still looked at them with disdain. This time you can't quit so easily. The two of them nodded. In the end, they turned around and egged on Sword Demon. Everyone has returned. Why are you still doing temporary work? Forget it, let's do it together. Sword Demon was firm. He smiled and didn't say anything. He wasn't so pure that he wouldn't get close to women. However, he wasn't like these two guys who would be shameless for girls. The two of them didn't say anything more. The girls were still there. They didn't have the mood to chat with Sword Demon. They immediately went to chat with the girls. Sword Demon was free now. He said to everyone. Yin Zhongmu said he's coming to Baishur City. He wants to find a time to gather with everyone tomorrow. Just for a gathering? Han family young master sneered. I didn't ask. I don't think so. Sword Demon was honest. At this time, 9 out of 10 people who contacted them wanted to talk about efficient leveling. As the leader of the organization, Yin Zhongmu obviously wanted to seize this opportunity to consolidate his strength. He's free now. Call him over. Young Master Han's tone was really arrogant. The guild leader of the most powerful guild in the parallel world was like a delivery boy, the kind that would rush over as soon as he called. Sword Demon didn't pay attention to him. He turned around and continued to ask others when they were free tomorrow. There's a lot of time. But what about Hongqian Yixiao's group? I don't know when they'll jump out and cause trouble again. Brother Yu said worriedly. They have to be able to find us first. If we weren't so conspicuous at the White Mill, they wouldn't have coincidentally bumped into us. Jian Nanyu and the others, who were very experienced in fighting, said. That's true. Brother Yu nodded. But then he thought about it. This meant that as soon as they started teaching, they would be exposed to the public. These guys would be able to find them easily. Thinking about this, Brother Yu felt like there was a fishbone stuck in his throat. To completely get rid of these guys, we have to first figure out their real goal. How far do they want to push Qianli? Jian Nanyu said. I don't know. Everyone shook their heads. I forgot to ask Non-Smiler. Do any of you have a friend with him? Brother Yu asked around. Forget it. Don't think about it. Tomorrow let Qianli ask Hongqian Yixiao himself. Someone said. Everyone was silent. What was going on? It was a mess. After that, the girls stayed in the tavern for a while before leaving. Some of them were going to go offline, while others were going to play for a while longer. Yutian Shenming and Unscathed in Battle Souls were also hooked away. The two of them eagerly followed them. Jian Nanyu and the others still hadn't recovered from the damage they received from the staff incident. They had to seize the time to level up. Dao Xiangmu and Lin Sunsen admired the skills of the Han family young master and strongly invited him to join them. As experts, everyone was very clear that the light priests in the parallel world didn't have the ability to level up alone. The higher the level, the more difficult it was. Even if they used quests to level up, the quests to kill monsters were very troublesome. This was a class that completely relied on a team to survive. No matter how overpowered a player's skills were, they couldn't change the position of a class. Just as the experts were thinking about this, they suddenly burst into tears. This was because they couldn't help but think of Gu Fei. This person relied on his skills to change the position of the class. That mage of his was completely nonsensical, yet nonsensical. It turned out that there were no absolutes in this world. Indeed, the Han family young master wasn't that overpowered. He also relied on a team to level up. However, compared to other priests who liked to have a fixed team, he was mostly in a random team. Actually, with the skills of the Han family young master, many people couldn't ask for more. However, this guy came and went as he pleased. One moment, he went to level up at 8 p.m. The next moment, he disappeared at 3 a.m. Which fixed team could tolerate his arrogant personality? This guy didn't care. He still did things his own way. Every day, when he wanted to level up, he would just go to the city gate and join a random team. He wasn't picky at all. Most players would play the game and play in random parties. Gradually they would form or join a fixed party. Young Master Han, who had been in a random party since the start of the open beta, was not a cleric. Most of the time, they were solo players, and light clerics were as rare as a phoenix's feather and a unicorn's horn. Currently in the Cloud City, Many people recognized this valiant king of random teams at the city gate. As long as you invited him, he would dare to join your team. His skills were amazing. Many fixed teams didn't want to bring their own priests when they saw this person. If they could join this priest team, they could brag about it the next day. Many people wanted to summarize this guy's training pattern, so that they could meet him every time they leveled up. In the end, everyone failed. This was his pattern. At this moment, Jian Nanyu and the others invited the Han family young master to level up. Coincidentally, this person also wanted to level up, so he didn't refuse and went with them. Brother Yu and Sword Demon saw that everyone was together and didn't want to be lonely, so they formed a 7+3 team and went to level up together. The night passed just like that. The next day, Gu Fei went online in the morning again. The battle with the veterans yesterday didn't seem to affect him at all. His days were still the same. He went online to check on the students' leveling situation. Everyone was very familiar with it and didn't need any guidance from him. He then left to do a few wanted quests. At this time, he recalled the excitement of fighting with the veterans yesterday. It was a little boring to fight with ordinary players. He looked at his friend's column. His brothers weren't there, and Yi Xiaowu wasn't there either. He walked around in a circle and went offline. When he came back in the afternoon, all his friends were online. As soon as he went online, he received a message from Sword Demon. Gu Fei thought there was enemy information and opened it excitedly. In the end, he saw that it was about the party in the Cloud Twilight. Of course, the gathering could only be held in the tavern. Gu Fei lazily moved towards the tavern. When he arrived, he was a little earlier than the agreed time. He randomly found a table and waited. One by one, more and more people arrived. Gu Fei asked about the situation after he went offline last night. When he found out that he didn't miss anything, he was slightly relieved. If you want to play so much, why did you go offline so early? Unscathed in battle didn't understand. You're already so old. I don't want to scold you, but it's just a game. You need to control yourself. Gu Fei criticized Unscathed in battle. Sword Demon's face turned red. He was the craziest player in the game. Was the #1 player undeserved? But wasn't it asking for a scolding to talk about control to a normal player? After everyone looked at him in disdain, the tavern door opened. Cloud Twilight let out a loud laugh and walked in after greeting everyone. There were too many of Cloud Twilight's brothers. For a moment, everyone couldn't tell if they had seen them before or not. In any case, they just smiled and nodded as a greeting. All 6 members of the Child Elite group had come. Wandering Blade's group of 7 didn't have much of a relationship with Cloud Twilight, so they didn't want to join in the fun. However, they thought that this person might want to talk about efficient leveling methods, so they sent Wandering Blade as their representative. Jianan Wandering was also a famous figure. When Yun Zhongmu heard the introduction, he immediately expressed his admiration. At the same time, he looked for the person who had asked about the 100 Lives Classic. 100 Lives Classic was online, but like Wandering Blade's group, he didn't know them and didn't want to know them, so he didn't come. Wandering Blade and 100 Lives Classic were both names that had been mentioned in Brother Yu's advertisement. Cloud Twilight obviously didn't want to talk nonsense, so he took the opportunity to bring up the topic of the studio. He hadn't even warmed his stool or ordered a drink. It was clear that he was in a hurry. So brothers, where are we going to develop the next leveling area? Cloud Twilight asked directly. This was the style of their group. As long as they knew each other and felt that they were good, they would treat each other like brothers. They wouldn't treat each other as strangers, and they wouldn't hold back when talking. They would say whatever they wanted to say. We just finished a wave yesterday, so we don't have a plan yet. Brother Yu replied. I also sent people to learn from the wave yesterday, Cloud Twilight said. Tell me later, it was a sea of people. How many people did you send? 40,000. Brother Yu didn't hide it. It was better to communicate with people like this. No wonder, Cloud Twilight exclaimed. Brothers, it's great to teach like this, but for us it's hard to practice. Cloud Twilight's temporary White Mill Alliance had occupied the leveling area during the day, and it was smooth sailing. However, as time passed, the number of people increased. At the peak of the night, It was like the population had exploded, and the White Mill was instantly filled to the brim. Under these circumstances, the Underworld Alliance couldn't control the situation. The players directly squeezed into their leveling circle. What could they do? The density of the population was frightening. The monsters were squeezed to death in the crowd. What kind of efficient leveling method was there to speak of? There was no room for any attacks. A warrior could casually use a whirlwind slash, and a conservative estimate would be that they could kill up to 10 players. The players complained, but there was no one to reason with. Some people complained about Qianli's drunk studio teaching so many people, but some people were clear that not all of the people squeezed in here were taught by Qianli's drunk studio. In just one day, many people had set up pirated classes to make a second income. It could be said that everyone was to blame for the current situation. However, the source of the problem was the efficient leveling method. The players were in a dilemma. If they didn't learn this leveling method, they were afraid that they wouldn't be able to beat others. If they learned it, they would waste their time here, and they wouldn't be as good as the players in other leveling areas. Let's go. They were also afraid that if they left, the leveling area would be empty, and someone else would take advantage of it. If they didn't leave, then everyone would continue to squeeze like this. Dilemma. Contradiction. The players now knew that in this situation, the efficient leveling method was really useless. If they didn't learn it, they were afraid of falling behind. Last night, during the peak period, they were fighting with the veterans. Later, they went to the White Mill to pay a visit. Even at that time, the White Mill was still in full swing. It could be seen that what Yun Zhongmu said was not an exaggeration. Hearing this guy's resentful tone, everyone held back their laughter. Brother Yu put on a straight face and nodded. Is that so? So it's like this. It's not me who said it. Brothers, if you do it like this, you might not get any benefits in the end. You might not know, but yesterday, tens of thousands of players glared at you and scolded you. In the end, most of the scolding was directed at you. Now that I think about it, a lot of people complained that you came up with this efficient leveling method and disrupted the order of the game. The Han family young master and the others didn't say anything. Frankly speaking, they had already guessed this situation. They just didn't know how Gu Fei would feel when he heard this news. Now that they had borrowed Yun Zhongmu's words, everyone turned to look at Gu Fei to see his reaction. This guy was really righteous sometimes. For example, the Misty Shadow Assassin. He still wanted to get rid of evil for the people. This time, it caused chaos. What would he think? However, at this time, Gu Fei didn't have any extreme reaction. He just listened to Yun Zhongmu's narration like everyone else. Suddenly, he realized that no one was talking. The Han family young master and the others were staring at him. He felt strange and asked, "Why are you looking at me?" You're the boss. What do we do next?" Brother Yu said. "What boss? I'm only in charge of developing the leveling method. Next time, I won't go and copy the religion. I don't want to split the money," Gu Fei said. Regarding the chaos caused by this leveling method, what do you think?" Brother Yu carefully asked. "What do I think? What should I think?" Gu Fei asked back. You don't think?" Brother Yu asked. "What are you beating around the bush for? Do you want to be chopped?" Gu Fei said. No. Brother Yu's face was bitter. Who did I offend? He looked at the others to see if they had anything to say. As a result, he saw the Han family young master bluntly say, "It's good that you don't have any thoughts. We're worried that you'll see the chaos caused by your leveling method and feel ashamed. That's why you're not willing to do it anymore." "Strange," Gu Fei said. "There are too many people, and we can't kill the monsters. The leveling efficiency method? Why don't you blame the leveling area for not being big enough?" Everyone had a weird expression on their faces. "Is it because of Hongchen Yixiao that you have feelings for the game? Why does it have to do with him?" Gu Fei was even more confused. They couldn't communicate. Everyone was troubled. The Han family young master was too lazy to talk. "Do you know about cheats in online games?" "I have. Simply put, it's a tool that gives players an advantage over those who don't use it. It's quite destructive to online games, and there hasn't been such a thing in the parallel world. Although the efficiency leveling method isn't a cheat, In a sense, it has the characteristics of a cheat. Did you just say cheats destroy the game? Gu Fei suddenly said. Yes, for example. Brother Yu was about to give an example, but Gu Fei was already confused. That can't be right. The ones that destroy the game should be the players who use cheats, right? Ha! Brother Yu was startled when he heard this. Gu Fei's perspective was not wrong. Cheats were just inanimate objects. If the players didn't use cheats, how could they destroy the game? Then what do you think of a cheat maker? The Han family young master suddenly asked. Everyone stared at him. They were worried that Gu Fei would suddenly be conflicted on this matter. It was rare for him to think from such a perspective. Han family young master was purposely leading him to a dead end. In the end, Gu Fei said respectfully, he's a pure, noble person who has broken away from vulgar interests. Everyone was stunned. Isn't this too shameless? Unexpectedly, Gu Fei quickly smiled and said, I'm joking. I know what you mean. I'm a cheat maker, and I'm spreading the word that cheats destroy the game. Everyone looked at each other. Gu Fei became serious again. Actually, a cheat maker is just my superficial identity. My real identity is a martial artist who specializes in kung fu. How many times have I said it? Damn. Everyone despised him. Yin Zhongmu became more and more confused as he listened. He scratched his head and said, What are you talking about? Why are you talking about cheats? Butterfly knot. After a period of killing, temporarily enter a period of calm transition, so that the students won't be too excited at the end of the month, low-key. Chapter 646. Han family young master and the others wanted to figure out Gu Fei's thoughts on this matter, but in the end, they couldn't figure out what Gu Fei was thinking. In any case, they knew that this person didn't have the mental burden that they thought he did, so they didn't bother about it anymore. They turned to Cloud Midnight. What did you just say? Cloud Midnight was stunned and said in a daze. I asked what you guys just said. Before that, where were we? A lot of people were complaining about the inefficient leveling method. Cloud Midnight said. Haha, people who complain shouldn't learn it. Han family young master said. Yin Zhongmu laughed bitterly. Of course, everyone understood this reasoning, but how many of them could truly let go of this matter? Take the current deadlock in the leveling area for example. They clearly knew that no one could level in the leveling area, but everyone was afraid that if they backed down, it would benefit others. As a result, both sides would suffer. If it was a guild, then it would be fine. Everyone could sit down and discuss a plan. But right now there were tens of thousands of wild players. They all had their own thoughts and habits, so how could they discuss it? As a result, they could only drag it out like this. Cloud Midnight saw that there was no way to level at this point, so he wisely retreated with his troops. The area that they originally occupied was quickly filled up. Cloud Midnight was puzzled. He had a few hundred people, so why didn't he see that there were fewer people after retreating from the leveling area? There were so many people on the side waiting for an opportunity. But in the end, Cloud Midnight was the same as those people. If he didn't use this efficient leveling method, he wouldn't be able to let it go. As a result, he took the initiative to contact Sword Demon, wanting to open a back door. Haha, Boss Cloud, if you have any ideas, just say them. Brother Yu laughed. Then I'll say it. Cloud Midnight rubbed his hands. He was the boss of the 10 Guild Alliance, and he was someone who spoke his mind. At this moment he seemed a bit uncomfortable. Say it. Everyone looked at him. That, with the current situation, even if we learn the efficient leveling method, we won't be able to use it because there are too many people. That's why I'd like to ask everyone. Could you help us develop a leveling area? Cloud and Twilight said. The experts laughed. In fact, they had long since guessed Cloud Twilight's intentions for coming, and they already had a plan for this matter. Looking at Yun Zhongmu's earnest expression, Brother Yu replied, what about the fees? This was precisely the crux of what made Cloud Midnight so nervous. The other side's leveling area had 40,000 players, and each person was worth 99 gold. That was 96 million gold. There were only about 4,000 people in the 10 Societies Alliance, and if they were to share the burden according to this total amount, each person would have to pay nearly 1,000 gold coins. This was not a small amount, and not everyone could afford it. But if that wasn't the case, why would the other party be willing to sacrifice such a huge benefit? Talk about friendship? At a time like this, Yin Zhongmu's mind was clear. He could tell that their friendship wasn't that deep. That was why he had revealed a bit about the chaotic state caused by the efficient leveling method in the beginning, hoping that these people would have a sense of crisis. In the end, these people didn't. From the looks of it, they were still doing business as usual, and wouldn't make any adjustments. Now that they were asking about the fees, Yin Zhongmu gritted his teeth. Even though he felt quite embarrassed, he still threw caution to the wind. In terms of fees, we really can't afford to pay 40,000 players. 1 million. Is that okay? This is already our limit. Of course, Yin Zhongmu couldn't afford 1 million by himself. This amount needed to be shared equally by the entire guild. After calculating it, each person would have to pay around 200 gold coins. This was also the result of Yin Zhongmu's discussion in the guild channel. Everyone agreed that this amount was acceptable. Haha. Brother, you laughed indifferently. In the chat, a group of people were discussing wildly. Fuck, this guy really is generous. That's 200 gold per person. Yutian Shenming complained. Old Yin is quite loyal. Sword Demon and Yin Zhongmu had fought side by side before, and he was a person who valued relationships. He always had a good impression of Yin Zhongmu. Fuck, we lost again. Unscathed in battle angrily said. What did we lose? Gu Fei didn't understand. A bet. Guess how much Yin Zhongmu would pay. Sword Demon came the closest, so he won. Brother, you said. Who guessed the least? Gu Fei asked. Yutian. He guessed that the other team would come to do wholesale, so they would pay an average price of less than 99 gold coins. Everyone looked at Yutian Shenming with disdain. Haha, Yutian, you win. Gu Fei said. What? Everyone was startled in the chat, and they suddenly realized something. On the table, Gu Fei had already opened his mouth to speak to Yin Zhongmu. What money are you talking about? Last time, you helped me protect my students. I still haven't thanked you properly. Yin Zhongmu stared blankly for a moment, and then he became wild with joy. Gu Fei clearly wanted to use this to express his gratitude. Yin Zhongmu excitedly stood up and continued to rub his hands. This is too polite. It's just a small matter. He had only brought a few kids around Moonlit City. He didn't expect that he would receive such a huge benefit from this. It's nothing. It's just a small matter for me. Gu Fei smiled. I'm too embarrassed. Yin Zhongmu said. Right, I know you'll be embarrassed. It's not like you to not give a single cent. It's still a 4 million gold transaction. I don't need 1 million. Just give me 500,000. Gu Fei said. Ah. Yin Zhongmu didn't expect that Gu Fei would still ask for money after they finished talking about the favor. In the beginning, Yin Zhongmu had been very worried that Gu Fei wouldn't agree to his offer of 1 million yuan. In fact, as long as Gu Fei had taken out 1 million yuan and nodded, Yin Zhongmu would have been very grateful. Now, not only had Gu Fei agreed, but he had even waived 500,000 yuan. This was enough to make Yin Zhongmu happy. Free? Just as Gu Fei said, Yin Zhongmu was too embarrassed to accept such a big favor. So after saying, ah, Yin Zhongmu immediately agreed. If it wasn't for the table between them, he would have immediately gone up to give Gu Fei a hug. Gu Fei made a bitter face and said, Actually, it's fine if I don't take money. But look at these people. Their faces are like pig liver. I can only ask you for 500,000 to shut them up. When Gu Fei opened his mouth, everyone knew that something was wrong. They didn't want to argue in front of Yin Zhongmu, but in the mercenary channel, there were a bunch of shouts that almost devoured Gu Fei. So, Gu Fei asked for 500,000 back for them. At the same time, he looked down on them mercilessly. Yin Zhongmu could see that other than Gu Fei, everyone else's eyes were about to spit fire. Yin Zhongmu already knew that Gu Fei was willing to give him a discount. He didn't want to let his friend suffer a loss, so he immediately said, Let's go with 1 million. I'm already embarrassed by this price. No need, just 500,000. Gu Fei waved his hand and looked at everyone with a happy expression. Am I not the boss? I'll make the decision now. Gu Fei said as he slammed the table twice. Half of the people on the table gave him the middle finger. Jian Nanyu didn't join the child elite group, so he couldn't discuss this in the mercenary channel. So he just silently watched the whole thing without saying a word. At this time, he could only silently shake his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. In his opinion, Qianli was acting on impulse and wasn't suited for business. Other than that, the child elite group was still as disharmonious as ever. Yin Zhongmu looked at everyone in a daze and didn't know what to say. However, Gu Fei had already generously extended his hand towards him. Did you bring the money? Yin Zhongmu asked everyone to open their pockets. 500,000 gold was equivalent to 50 million gold bags. This bunch of people put the money into their own pockets. At this time, you take 10 and I take 8. In the end, the money was piled up on the table. This immediately caught the attention of everyone in the tavern. Most normal players didn't use the million gold bags, but now, there was a table full of them. Gu Fei acted like a boss and waved his hand. Take it. However, there was no discussion on how to split the money. After everyone was stunned for a moment, and scathed in battle, and Yutian Shenming didn't care anymore. They directly pounced on the money like hungry tigers. The two of them almost took it all away. Gu Fei didn't care about them. He got up and asked Yin Zhongmu, which leveling area? Let's go now. Yin Zhongmu really liked such a direct and efficient style. He carefully said, we want to do it in our moonlit night city. Is that okay? Yes, let's go. Gu Fei was about to move. Yin Zhongmu hurriedly said, how can we let you waste time on the road? He turned his head and said to someone behind him, where's the teleportation scroll? The person hurriedly took out a teleportation scroll from his pocket. Yin Zhongmu took it and handed it to Gu Fei. It looked like someone in the ancient times brought a large palanquin to invite someone over. The other people were still arguing over how to split the money. Sword Demon was a man of his word. Now that he was a temporary worker, he wouldn't ask for a single cent when he wasn't working. He sat there without moving. Jian Nanyu was here for the money, so he was even more professional. He didn't do anything. He was too embarrassed to touch the money, so he could only sit there in a daze. When he heard that Gu Fei was about to move, Jian Nanyu hurriedly got up and said, I'll go with you? How many people can a teleportation scroll take? Gu Fei asked. He really treated it as a large palanquin. 4. Yin Zhongmu replied. They were living a good life now. They were no longer country bumpkins who hadn't even used teleportation scrolls before. Who else wants to go? Gu Fei turned around and asked. If you want to go, then go. I still have scrolls. Yin Zhongmu had taken advantage of them, so he couldn't be stingy about such a small matter. He hurriedly took out more scrolls. Brother, you suggested in the channel. Why don't we all go? After we're done, we can go back to Cloud City. Brother Yu acted as if he missed his homeland, but in reality, he wanted to avoid the veterans. After all, Brother Yu didn't have much fighting spirit. It was better to avoid trouble. How could the young master of the Han family not see through his thoughts? He looked at him and said, you can't hide from them no matter what. As long as we still want to earn this money, they will find us as soon as you post an announcement online. Yin Zhongmu was excited. The other party seemed to be in trouble. He was feeling guilty about taking advantage of them. Even if he couldn't pay, wouldn't it be easier to put in effort? He immediately asked, what? There are still people who dare to cause trouble for us? If you don't mind, let us join in and play. Suddenly, there were 4,000 more thugs. Brother Yu couldn't react for a moment. When he thought about how Gu Fei often played dirty, Brother Yu suddenly realized something. Qianli was being so nice to Yin Zhongmu. Could it be that he wanted to use them to deal with Yi Xiaowu and the others? This thinking was a bit one-sided. Since when would Gu Fei let someone else do the fighting? Actually, Gu Fei had already told him the truth. It's nothing much, it's not worth mentioning. But Brother Yu wanted to understand it more deeply. No one objected to Yin Zhongmu's suggestion. In the end, the Han family young master said, "Then let's all go to Moonlit Night City. It's not like we can just take the money for free. Let's put in some effort." What a dignified reason. "Then you guys go first. We'll be there soon." Jiannanyu wanted to call his brothers. He knew that Gu Fei needed to develop a more efficient leveling method. Every class had its own differences. It would take a few hours, but it would be enough for them to reach Moonlit Night City. "Don't." Yin Zhongmu didn't agree. "Who else is there? Call them over. We'll teleport away together. We have plenty of teleportation scrolls." "Call them over," Gu Fei said. Jiannanyu didn't stand on ceremony anymore. He called everyone over to the tavern. These people quickly asked how the business was going. In the end, they found out that Gu Fei didn't raise the price even though he was offering 1,000,000. Instead, he reduced the price by 500,000 as a favor. Everyone was happy and worried at the same time. They were happy that he was a good person. It was a good thing that they could become friends with him. They were worried that he was too kind. They would lose many opportunities to earn money for no reason. According to Jiannanyu's observation of Yin Zhongmu's character, he would pay them in installments. A leveling area would cost 4,000,000. However, if they couldn't pay it all at once, they would pay 1,000,000 down and the rest in installments. The interest would be ignored. Considering that the prices of goods in the game were constantly rising, and the value of gold was constantly depreciating, Yin Zhongmu would still be able to take advantage of them in the end. He probably wouldn't refuse. Even if Gu Fei really did owe him a favor, he would still be able to return the favor by taking 1,000,000 off or 3,000,000. Now that he was offering 500,000, it was a huge favor. Even Yin Zhongmu himself was terrified. He wanted to be a hired thug and use the teleportation scrolls. Why bother? Jiannanyu shook his head. He hated himself for not having the ability to do so. Flaming Jacket, Glue, and the others arrived soon after. 100 Generations Jingren was also called over. He didn't ask why they were going to Moonlit Night City. He was just excited when he heard that they would be using teleportation scrolls. Of course, 100 Generations Jingren had never experienced such luxurious things before. After confirming that there was no charge, he showed great enthusiasm. Cloud Zhongmu and the others had already set the coordinates for the teleportation scrolls. The four of them took the teleportation scrolls and shook them. White light flashed, and the tavern was instantly emptied out. Only the other players were left to gossip. The landing point was one of the gates of Moonlit Night City. Thinking back to the battle in Moonlit Night City, and now that Silvermoon had left the game, Gu Fei felt a little emotional. He turned around and asked Cloud Zhongmu, "Do you know that Silvermoon has left the game?" "Ha! That bastard. I haven't killed him with my own hands yet." Cloud Midnight felt extremely regretful. He hadn't killed Silvermoon, but he had died at her hands a few times. He had already chased her out of Moonlit City, but now he was being schemed against in Cloud City. Just thinking about it made him feel sullen. It's all in the past. Gu Fei patted him. Fuck. It was obvious that Cloud Zhongmu missed Silvermoon a lot. "Where are we going to the leveling area?" Gu Fei asked. "Follow me." Cloud Zhongmu already had a plan. He led the way, but the others were a little hesitant. As the 10 Guilds Alliance was a single entity, Gu Fei, the developer of the 10 Guilds Alliance, was the only one who needed to participate in this transaction. Afterwards, the 10 Guilds Alliance would be able to organize the teaching activities themselves. Hence, the 10 Guilds Alliance's members were actually superfluous. Seeing that Gu Fei and the others were about to head to the 10 Guilds Alliance, the 10 Guilds Alliance's members didn't know if they should go or not. It would be very embarrassing if they went but had nothing to do. "You guys don't need to come. I'll go with Baisher." Gu Fei was actually very considerate. The young master elite group's people were so happy that they didn't want to go, but Jiannanyu and the others insisted on following. If they didn't do something, they wouldn't be happy with the money. Although Zhan Wushang and Imperial Sky Shinming fought fiercely for the 500,000 gold coins just now, in the end, it would still be divided equally according to the number of people. "Let's all go. Just treat it as leveling." Seeing the professionalism of Jiannan and the others, the pride of these experts couldn't take it anymore. This made their character seem even worse than that of bandits. They were just living off Gu Fei. It was too much. Along the way, Cloud Zhongmu introduced the leveling area they had chosen to Gu Fei, Silent Night Valley. It's that place. Gu Fei was filled with emotions. When he first arrived at Moonlit Night City, he sent Silvermoon to jail, which caused a lot of trouble. At that time, Gu Fei hadn't learned all his skills and was chased everywhere. In the end, he and Coward's savior hid in Silent Night Valley. This leveling area was a level 50 leveling area. Gu Fei had to remind Cloud Zhongmu, "You want to fight monsters 10 levels higher than you. That's a bit difficult." People with slow reactions and no agility might not be able to handle it. The wilderness camp and white mill that Gu Fei and the others had developed were all leveling areas between level 40 and 45. The levels of the players and monsters matched. However, there was a problem with these leveling areas. For high-end players like Sword Demon and the others, the efficiency of leveling didn't mean much. They relied on their own fighting style and equipment to improve their efficiency. With such a large guild like Cloud Zhongmu, there were naturally many high-end players. Cloud Zhongmu himself was one of the top 5. Many people had already discovered this problem during the leveling process in White Mill. Moreover, these veterans had a clearer understanding of the efficiency of leveling. This was a technique that could completely help ordinary players have the ability to fight monsters higher than them. Players with good equipment could kill monsters 5 levels higher than them. As long as one was familiar with the efficiency of leveling, even without equipment, they should be able to kill monsters 5 levels higher than them. Therefore, Cloud Zhongmu greedily wanted to kill monsters 10 levels higher than him. Only then would he feel the thrill of efficiency. After hearing Gu Fei's reminder, Cloud Zhongmu couldn't help but be startled. He hurriedly asked, "What do you mean?" "Look at me. But I put all my points into agility. This is my insurance against monsters higher than me. I don't really remember the monsters in Silent Night Valley. I'll go and try it out. I'll look at the situation of the monsters first," Gu Fei said. Chapter 647. Silent Night Valley. You could enter from a crevice in the mountain. The light inside the valley was dim, and there were cliffs all around. There were no other entrances. This was also the reason why Cloud Twilight chose this leveling area. They bought this high-efficiency leveling method because they wanted it to be exclusive to their own guild, so they had to do it in a closed environment. Places like the White Mill or the Wilderness Camp could be stolen by just 2 players passing by. No matter how strong the 10 Guilds alliance was, they didn't have the confidence to completely seal off a leveling area like that. As a result, they chose Silent Night Valley. This place was the best choice that Cloud Twilight could think of. However, when he heard Gu Fei say that there was a requirement for agility when fighting monsters 10 levels higher than him, his heart was once again shrouded in a shadow. As a thief, Cloud Twilight obviously didn't lack agility. However, out of the 4,000 brothers in the guild, at least 3,000 didn't have agility. Cloud Twilight was currently praying for his brothers. He hoped that after Gu Fei's experiment, he would be able to tell him that the monsters here didn't require agility. There were 3 types of monsters in Silent Night Valley. The most common type was called the Valley Keeper. It was a melee-type monster that was similar to a warrior. These were the monsters that Cloud Twilight and the others wanted to level up with. The other type was a bit stronger than the Valley Keeper. It was also a warrior type, but compared to the Valley Keeper wielded a shield, so it had better defensive capabilities. The Valley Keeper leader was mixed in with the other Valley Keepers, so it was relatively rare. There was also a type of hidden valley monster. It had the characteristics of both a lurker and a thief. It could set up traps and attack. It was agile and very difficult to deal with. This type of monster was even rarer. It didn't look like it was provided for players to level up, but more like it was specifically designed to cause trouble for players. At this moment, Gu Fei was fighting with a Valley Keeper. Originally, he was here to take refuge. Occasionally, he would fight 1 or 2 monsters to prevent them from harassing him and Coward Savior. As a result, he had no impression of the skills of the monsters here. In this exchange, Gu Fei was once again testing and verifying his strength. At this moment, he was wielding an ordinary longsword as he fought against the small monsters. Everyone else looked for a spot where they wouldn't attract monsters, and quietly watched. Cloud Morning was so nervous that he didn't even dare to breathe loudly. It wasn't easy for him to wait until Gu Fei killed the monster. Cloud Morning couldn't wait to rush over and ask, "How was it?" "Not so fast." Gu Fei didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "You guys go barbecue, sing, and have a tea party or something. I'll call you when you're done." After Gu Fei said this, he looked for another monster to communicate with. Brother Yu and the others who had worked with Gu Fei before knew that it would take at least half an hour for Gu Fei to come up with a set of strategies. Especially since this was a formal business, he didn't have to develop just one strategy, but many. So these people had long since left the sidelines. It was rare for them to come to the level 50 leveling area, so they were busy leveling. Yin Zhongmu and his brothers were extremely worried. How could they be in the mood to do these things? They continued to keep their distance from Gu Fei and watched without blinking. But gradually, everyone's gazes moved away from Gu Fei. Gu Fei was using a broken sword to grind against the small monsters. It wasn't exciting, but the leveling around him was extremely exciting. Every member of the child elite group had their own unique characteristics. When combined together, their explosive power was extremely strong. As for Jiannan's team, their coordination was even better than that of the child elite group. Apart from this, there was also 100 years of experience. He casually pinched a small monster and gave it a good beating. This was even more valiant than a team. Cloud Morning and the others were speechless. Just like that, Gu Fei stared blankly for about 40 minutes. After killing a few monsters, he finally stopped and walked towards Cloud and Twilight's direction. When Cloud Morning saw that the results were finally out, he calmed himself down and carefully observed Gu Fei's expression. He hoped that he could see something from it so that he could be mentally prepared. Gu Fei's expression was normal. He pulled out his sleeves and wiped the sweat off his forehead. He shook his head and said to Cloud Morning, "Classes that don't add agility can't train alone." Cloud Morning immediately became like a deflated balloon. After a while he said, "Then how much should I add agility?" "Level 12. Gu Fei said, "That's the lowest standard. I suggest adding 15 levels. That way, there's a higher margin of error." Level 15. Cloud Morning and the others looked at each other. Obviously, other than the thieves and archers, which meant that the brawlers might be able to reach this standard by adding some agility, the other warriors, mages, and knights were all out of the question. Is there no other way? Cloud Morning didn't give up. Gu Fei shook his head. After all, it's level 50. Actually, the two leveling areas in the Wilderness Camp and the White Mill, according to my current standards, can't be fully utilized without adding agility. Later, for the convenience of the players, I made some adjustments. But in reality, there's a clear difference in efficiency between playing without agility and playing with agility. Playing with agility is the most efficient way to level. What about this side? Can there be any adjustments? Cloud Morning didn't care whether playing without agility was a half-baked method. He only needed a way to play. Unfortunately, Gu Fei clearly shook his head. It really can't be done. Looks like we can only ask our brothers to collect agility equipment. Cloud Morning turned around and said to his brothers. They all looked troubled. Level 15 agility requires 75 points. It's not that easy to gather. Most equipment with additional stats are so expensive. Sigh. While everyone sighed, Gu Fei said from behind them, "Agility is a must for solo training. But if it's a team of 2, you don't have to add agility." When Cloud Morning heard the words "don't have to add agility," he quickly turned around and asked, "How do we do it?" "Wait a moment," Gu Fei said to him, then turned around and called for 100 Generations Jingren. After calling him over, he tossed Cloud Morning to the side and started explaining to 100 Generations Jingren to a small monster. He kept gesturing with his hands and occasionally got into a stance. Yin Zhongmu and the others also perked up their ears to listen. And in the end, they heard Gu Fei spew out words such as single buckle, double row of hands, palm insertion, elbow rotation, short step, broken jade step, wrist roll, and so on. Hundred Era's strategist kept nodding his head with a look of understanding on his face, but the more Yin Zhongmu and the others listened, the more confused they became. They didn't know what to do. After a full 10 minutes, Gu Fei finally finished. 100 Generations Jingren closed his eyes and thought for a while, then said, "Let me try it out on my own." "Okay." Gu Fei nodded. Then 100 Generations Jingren rolled up his sleeves and grabbed a small monster. His fighting style was the same as Gu Fei's, just now very slow. Cloud Morning and the others didn't know what was going on, but they didn't dare to ask. They could only wait patiently. Finally 100 Generations Jingren killed the small monster. Cloud Morning and the others were about to go forward when 100 Generations Jingren turned around and said, "Let me try again." He then went to kill another monster. In the end he killed 3 monsters in a row and finally stopped. Cloud Morning and the others were numb. They didn't know what they were going to do next, so they just stood there and didn't move. However, there was good news this time. Gu Fei walked over and said to them, "Watch carefully. 100 Generations Jingren and I will demonstrate." Cloud Morning and the others were excited and applauded. "I'm a paladin, he's a grandmaster of combat," Gu Fei said. After saying that, the two of them started fighting the monster. Cloud Twilight and the others watched with wide eyes, but they really couldn't see the essence of the fight. They only noticed that the two of them weren't moving very fast, but they were moving very slowly. They were actually beating the monster to the ground. "How is it? Do you understand?" After killing the small monster, Gu Fei turned around and asked. "Honestly, I don't understand." Cloud Morning and the others said. "You all saw how it was fought, right?" Gu Fei said. "Then I saw it, but..." Cloud Morning didn't say anything because in their eyes, the fighting style was very ordinary. However, a level 50 Valley Guardian was defeated by them just like that. This was the reality that they saw with their own eyes. Cloud Morning and the others were at a loss. Gu Fei smiled and said, "There's no rush, let's see this fighting style." After saying that, he threw the sword in his hand into 100 Generations Jingren's hands, and said to Cloud Morning and the others, "He's a warrior, I'm a mage." As he said that, he took out the most commonly used mage's staff from his pocket. This time, Gu Fei's fighting style was much more spectacular than last time. That was because during the process of attacking, Gu Fei used a spell. He waved his hand and chanted a spell. The trajectory of the spell was very coordinated with Gu Fei's movements. When he turned around and waved his hand, the flames seemed to flow out from his fingertips and fluttered onto the monsters' bodies. The mage in Cloud Twilight's formation felt relaxed and carefree. He felt that there was only one word to describe this scene: handsome. But it was a pity that after a few of these cool close-range magic performances, Gu Fei turned his head and awkwardly said, "I'm out of mana. Pay attention to my movements. There are some places where you can use your own imagination to fill in the blanks." After defeating the monster again, Gu Fei came over and asked, "How was it?" "This seems to be quite difficult." This time, the mage saw Gu Fei's performance clearly, and after verifying it, he realized the difficulty of this fighting style. Gu Fei nodded. "Without agility, you can only increase your control of the rhythm. You have to spend some time to familiarize yourself with the small monster's attack rhythm, and then spend some time with your partners. The advantage is that you don't have to waste points on agility. There's one more thing." Gu Fei continued. "Archers are a bit more troublesome. I don't really know how to use a bow, so I can't integrate it into close-range combat. That's why I developed an archer's fighting style that's similar to a thief's, except that I can use long weapons. But in reality, whether it's a sword or a dagger, an archer's attack power is greatly reduced. From an efficiency perspective, it can't compare to a close-range profession." Cloud Morning nodded repeatedly. "Then let's start learning now," Gu Fei said. "Which one should we start with?" Cloud Morning asked. "Let's start with a single person with agility. Two-person coordination is more difficult, so we'll learn it later." "Okay." Cloud Morning nodded. A single person with agility, so naturally, he would personally become the apprentice. Cloud Morning was now one of the top 5. His equipment and techniques were all very good, and normal players couldn't compare to him. Under Gu Fei's hands-on guidance, he quickly grasped it, and then was sent to the side to practice. While Gu Fei was teaching him, Sword Demon and Blackwater were also watching from the side. At first, Gu Fei told them that the efficiency leveling method for top-notch experts like them wasn't very useful, but that was for the same level monsters. Now that it was a leveling method that was 10 levels higher, it was valuable to them. However, Silent Night Valley wasn't a place where they would stay for a long time, so there was no need to rush to learn it. The two just wanted to learn it first, and then experiment it here. If it was really useful, then they could find Gu Fei to learn from them in the leveling area. There was no need to doubt Sword Demon and Blackwater's skill level. Gu Fei taught Cloud Morning, and the two of them also grasped it. They each grabbed their daggers and went to find monsters to experiment with. After Gu Fei finished teaching Cloud Morning, he pulled one of the archers and began to explain. Thus, Yutian Shiming and Glue stepped out and followed suit. In the end, they also went to find monsters to experiment with. After that, it was the two-person coordination method. Gu Fei held a staff in his hand, and 100 years of experience wielded a sword with both hands. Clearly, they were a mage and a berserker. Cloud Morning's people hadn't even stepped out yet, but South Windbreaker and Flaming Clothes were already in position. Unscathed in battle was very anxious. The mage in their formation was Gu Fei, and he was their teacher. He anxiously went to the Han family young master and said, "Pretend to be a mage and practice with me." Han family young master gave him a middle finger, and Unscathed in battle went to Brother Yu. Brother Yu wiped his sweat and said, "I can't pretend." Brother Yu didn't even understand his own class, so how could he pretend to be another class? In the end, Dao Xiangmu was a good friend. Seeing that Unscathed in battle was scratching his head, he volunteered to help him. He waved his staff and pretended to be a mage. As soon as this group of amateurs got started, they finally realized that this duo's fighting style was indeed much more difficult than flying solo. As a mage, the coordination between their movements, and spells was very high. Dao Xiangmu was only a guest player, and he couldn't cast any spells. He could only wave his staff, so it wasn't a big deal. However, the real mage who was with Cloud Morning was in trouble. He had never tried this kind of fighting method in his life, and he felt that it was indescribably weird. When he stretched his legs, he forgot to wave his staff. When he waved his staff, he forgot to move. When he moved, he forgot to chant. When he did chant, the target of the spell wasn't the monster he was fighting. The spells that flew out randomly attracted a bunch of monsters. If it wasn't for the fact that everyone quickly went to kill the monsters, the two poor guys would have been surrounded by the monsters. Be careful. The warrior who was working with him was also covered in cold sweat. You don't know. Fuck, it's weird. I can't do it. The mage couldn't find the right words to describe his feelings. Why don't I know? Do you think I'm feeling good? The warrior smiled bitterly. 100 years of statecraft's two-handed sword was also full of tricks. Normal players only knew how to stand straight and slash. They wouldn't be able to do so many tricks. The warrior waved his hands like a robot. He felt that his arms and legs were about to be entangled. As the two of them played with each other in a nondescript manner, the little monster that was used for the experiment turned the tables on them, and continuously used them as bait. The two of them couldn't take it anymore. They used the wild fighting method of Moonlit Night City, and punched and kicked the monsters to death. Looking at Gu Fei's critical gaze, the two of them lowered their heads in shame. They looked like elementary school students who had made a mistake. The warrior was more obedient. He looked around and found a withered log that was as tall as a person on the ground. He hurriedly carried it over and placed it on the ground. He said embarrassedly, "It's too hard. Let's use a wooden log to practice first." Gu Fei knew that it was difficult for normal players to master this fighting method, but he couldn't help but be reluctant to increase his dexterity. Therefore, he didn't say anything. He and 100 Reincarnations Jingluan continued to demonstrate with the mobs, while the other two ran circles around a wooden dummy. They wanted to make the same attack moves that Gu Fei and 100 Reincarnations Jingluan used. This lesson lasted for a long time. Usually, a set of fighting techniques could be learned in an hour. Now that an hour had passed, the two of them were still as clumsy as before. They jumped around the dead wooden dummy and bumped into each other from time to time. Cloud Twilight's solo agility playstyle was already quite impressive. From time to time, he would pay attention to the progress of his other brothers. The stupidity of these two fellows made him feel extremely embarrassed. Fortunately, the two teachers were still extremely patient. Cloud Twilight was really afraid that if he angered these two masters too much, they would immediately quit. The group of people spent the afternoon in the valley. The mage and warrior duo practiced for 3 hours, but they didn't make any progress. However, they managed to memorize the movements, and they were still trying to familiarize themselves with it. Gu Fei and 100 Years of Statecraft had some free time, so they demonstrated the paladin and priest fighting methods. This priest referred to dark priests. Light priests didn't have any damage output. No matter how exquisite their leveling methods were, they were still useless. Unless there was a priest that dared to put points into strength, making a strength priest could be considered as having some physical damage output. However, such a bold person had never appeared, so light priests were not among the believers who practiced the efficiency training method. As for the dark priests, apart from the kiss of death after the level 40 class advancement, the power of their previous attack skill, Holy Light Orb, had also increased. This was because it was no longer called Holy Light Orb, but Dark Orb. With these two skills, a dark priest could be considered to be solo training. At this moment, Gu Fei was playing the role of a dark priest. Unfortunately, he couldn't use the skills of a dark priest, so he could only blindly demonstrate with his bare hands. This made it even more difficult to learn. There was a dark priest among the people who came over, but not only did he have to learn Gu Fei's fighting methods, he also had to figure out the places where he could cast the spells himself. It was very tiring. Brother Yu was also very depressed. On the other side, after the paladin fighting method was revealed, Unrivaled Lucky Star immediately grabbed their priest, Lin Sunsun, and pretended to be a dark priest. Brother Yu stole a glance at the Han family young master, but this person had already seen through him, and was already waiting for him to show his middle finger. Brother Yu wanted to cry, but no tears came out. It was such a novel thing, but he didn't have the chance to try it. He wanted to die. Gu Fei took turns to demonstrate the two fighting methods for the entire afternoon. Looking at the way the other side was learning, he couldn't help but shake his head. Finally, he looked at the time and said, "Yo, do you want to go offline and have dinner first?" I quit. Unexpectedly, there were many people who said this. If it was his own students who said this, Gu Fei would definitely teach them a lesson. He couldn't be bothered to pay attention to these people. "Then I'll go down and rest for a bit. I'll come back at night to teach you guys," Gu Fei said. Okay. Cloud Midnight immediately stopped what he was doing and prepared to send Gu Fei out of the valley. You're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.